Hey there, welcome to the Instructors Roundtable. I am your host, Adam Kanakin. I'm also the creator of the Tactical Breakdown podcast. This is round 3 on firearms training in law enforcement. But before we jump into this panel discussion, I want to first acknowledge the first responders and medical staff who are out there battling the COVID-19 pandemic around the world. We're in unprecedented times, and our first responders are being called upon continuously to help their communities, knowing full well that they're putting themselves in harm's way. During this time, the importance of mental health cannot be understated. There's no reprieve from stress of work because when you get home, you're isolated. You're cut off from everybody else. You're confined to your home without the benefit of social support from your friends and your fellow officers. There's going to be no beers after work. There's going to be no debriefs. There's going to be no way to decompress. And that's going to take a toll. The threat to your health is going to remain constant. The health of yourself, the health of your family. And there's going to also be financial constraints due to the economic shutdown, which is also very stressful. And I ask all of you, look out for your buddy. Look out for your fellow officer. We don't know what the outcome of this COVID-19 pandemic is going to be, sociologically, financially, economically. So please look out for one another. Watch their six and know that they have yours. We're going to get through this and be stronger for it. Now, as I said, this is the third iteration of the Instructors Roundtable. Today's topic is firearms training, and I'm excited to have compiled a panel of experts who are always ready to jump right into the discussion and talk training. Now, initially, we had two experts, Bruce Siddle and Luann Hamblin, who were slated to be part of this IRT. However, due to the rapidly evolving situation that we find ourselves in, they were unable to make it today. So in their place, I found two equally qualified and experienced experts who I am honored to have be part of the Tactical Breakdown family. Listen, I'm going to jump right into it. Here is your panel for round 3. All right, the first instructor I'm going to introduce to you today is Paolo Grandis. Paolo comes to us from Mantova, Italy, and has shot competitively and teaches his techniques worldwide. Right now, he's strapped in North America due to the COVID-19 outbreak, but I'm so honored to have him on the show. He instructed for the last 4 ILET annual training conferences in the United States and has trained numerous military and law enforcement groups, including the U.S. Marshals, the South Baldwin Special Response Team, the Italian Army, Serbian Army, the Presidential Security Division, and Commandos Regiment in the Democratic Republic of Sri Lanka, among many others. He is a product development consultant and instructor for DTG Defense Technology Group, specializing in Kalashnikov and HS product weapons. Paolo, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. All right, next up on the hit list, Todd Fletcher. Now, if you don't know Todd, he has over 25 years of law enforcement experience as a patrol officer, a criminal detective, patrol sergeant, and training sergeant. Todd has been a law enforcement instructor for over 23 years, and as a field training officer, empty hand control tactics, taser, baton, pepper spray use of force, and firearms instructor. He is an ILET staff instructor for the Master Instructor Development Program and has provided firearms training, integrated use of force training, and training consulting services to law enforcement agencies, private security companies, and armed citizens. He has testified as an expert witness in cases involving police training and the use of force. Additionally, he has trained officers, private security, military personnel, and armed citizens around the world. Todd, brother, thank you so much for being here. All right, I'm so excited to introduce the next two instructors, both of which picked up that call last minute, dropped everything that they were doing to jump on and do this call with us. So thank you guys so much for doing that. First on that list is Brandon Wright. Brandon's a former law enforcement officer and SWAT officer who's currently the regional manager for Smith & Wesson on the East Coast. He has been a competitive shooter since 2012 with Team Smith & Wesson, and during that time has achieved Grandmaster in USPSA, a Distinguished Master in IDPA, and is a 3-time IDPA national champion. Along with firearms, he teaches SWAT operations, tactical considerations, fighting from a vehicle, defensive driving, armored vehicle ops, off-road ops, and improvised road ops. So, Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. All right, last up on our list, and by no means least, is Joseph Ferrera. You may know him as Little Joe, but he has over 43 years of experience in law enforcement and corrections. He has been training officers for over 32 years and is a staff instructor at a police academy in Oakland County, Michigan. He is presented at ILET, ASLET, ILET, ALETC, and various local and national conferences in the United States and Canada. He is a human factor science staff instructor and presents instructor training in threat pattern recognition and other science-based use of force programs, in addition to having been trained by the late Colonel Rex Applegate in his point shooting system. He has been a subject matter expert in law enforcement and corrections training and has given expert testimony in state and federal courts on the use of force. Joe, it's an honor to have you here, brother. All right, I'm so excited for this lineup. I'm sure you're ready to jump right into it. Before we do, real quickly, I just want to remind everyone that there is going to be a roundtable happening every month, the last Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. Central Time. Next month, the topic is going to shift to active threat response, and that panel is going to be released in early April. Make sure you don't miss it. Hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, it's just below the video, and you're notified when a new episode comes out or we start a new live stream. Additionally, if you haven't already checked out the Tactical Breakdown podcast, I would definitely encourage you to do that as well. You can go straight to thebreakdown.ca or type in Tactical Breakdown into the search bar of any podcast player to find it. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You'll get all of the episodes, stay up to date with the world of law enforcement training. All right, I hope you're ready for this. Let's jump into it. Here we go. All right, welcome to the Instructors Roundtable, everyone. Again, technical hiccups, not my fault. It's my production team, so they're at fault for that one, not me. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
It's an honor.
So, real
Thank
quick,
you, Adam.
everybody, anybody watching this is going to be pretty adept, and notice that we actually don't have Brandon on, but we do have another instructor joining us. With Paolo there. And obviously, Alexandra, what I'm going to do, instead of me completely trying to go through and give your expertise, can you just give everybody just a real quick snippet of your background and why you're so excited to jump on the call with us today?
Oh, thanks, Adam. I'm really excited to be here. I've been in law enforcement for about 22 years. I currently am a police sergeant in the northwest suburbs of Chicago and work as a firearms instructor and a crisis intervention instructor and do a whole bunch of different things in the instruction world. I have a private business as well since it's 10 years now, so 2009, Phoenix Firearms Training. And again, happy to be here. I'm also on the board of ILET, the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And you're a little laggy on there, so I don't know if maybe we got to sort out your internet a bit, but before we really jump into everything, and I kind of send everybody a quick topics list of everybody who had been sending me questions and comments for this roundtable on firearms training. Now, we have a lot of stuff going on with the COVID-19, and it's different everywhere else in the world. I mean, up here in Canada, our Prime Minister this morning just announced that they're going to be setting a mandatory quarantine for anybody coming into the country, and if you don't, you could be arrested. There's a lot of different things happening in a lot of different places in the world. So one thing, I want to start off with something fun. And because you're all firearms experts, and what I want to do is find out if this deteriorates completely and we're all stuck, and you get one system to run, you get one complete system, that's it. What are you going to pick and why? So Todd, why don't we start with you?
Something that we already own?
Yes, something that you already own.
I'd probably go with my AR-10, AR platform and a 308. I think it's a very diverse and very flexible platform. It's accurate, runs just like everybody's AR-15s, and still use it to hunt deer. You could use it to hunt feral hogs here in Texas. I think it's a compact, lightweight enough to be maneuverable. That's probably what I go with.
I love it. I love it. Joe, what about you, man? What are you taking with you?
Well, if I'm only given one choice, it'll be a handgun. Probably be my issued Glock 17. If you're giving me a long gun too, then as odd as it might sound to a lot of the viewers right now, I'd go with my Mini 14. I've got a lot
Can't
of
go wrong with
clipping
Mini.
on it. I've had it, oh God, since the early 90s. I was able to purchase it from my agency when I retired, and it's the gun I know the best. So my Mini 14 and my Glock 17.
Awesome. And then you two, you each get a pick. So which one are you going to take?
I'll stick with what I know, my AR, my 1911.
All right.
For me, my Kalashnikov and my Glock.
All right. Well, I'm nowhere near as adept at shooting as any of you, but I'm going to, just from what I've been experienced with, I'm going to take my 1911 high-power Browning. That's what we shot with Canadian Forces, and that thing lasts forever. You can't wreck that thing, so I'm going to take that with me. But all right, so that's cool. And if you're listening to this, and you can tune into the comments, and you can put your suggestion as to what you'd put in there and what you'd take with you. And additionally, if you're watching this, whether it's recorded or live, thank you for being here. And for those of you who are here live, later on in the show, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a little bit of a giveaway for you guys. We actually got all our IRT shirts in, and we got some new patches in, and they actually are pretty slick. They were done by our friends Patch Panel up here in Canada. So I'm going to give away some shirts and some patches to the people that are listening to this live. So make sure you stick around for that. Now, let's jump into some conversation. Like I said, I had sent out a topics list to everybody, and the one topic that came up the most, bar none, was qualifications and why they are just ineffective. And my biggest thing is with the four of you that are here, I'd like to get each of your thoughts on the difference between maybe qualification, certification, and dynamic training. And what is the current issue, and why haven't we moved away from the way we've been doing qualifications for the last 50 years? You know what, Joe, maybe I want to start with you, and I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, well, again, representing PPCT management systems and the human factors science people, we traditionally have done law enforcement firearms qualifications from anywhere from about, let's say 15 feet out to 25, 30 yards. And yet statistically, we know that a majority of law enforcement shootings are close quarter, like 3 to 12 feet, spontaneous, sudden and unexpected encounters. And we don't spend a lot of time teaching both the threat recognition that would cue us up that something's going wrong, or the response, the rapid, the ability to acquire the threat itself, rapidly get out of the way in a very simple manner, and engage the threat without us losing our lives.
Awesome. Todd, what are your thoughts on the way we're doing qualifications right now?
Well, I think that it starts with making sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to the verbiage. A lot of people say qualification, and to them that means training. But to me, qualification is a test. It's a test of minimum standards, and they're not realistic. A lot of people get wrapped around the axle about what their qualification is. Should we change the qualification? Should we make it harder? And quite frankly, I don't care about qualification. Again, it's a test of minimum standard. If you weren't able to qualify, you wouldn't have graduated from the basic academy to begin with. You wouldn't be out on the street because your admin would be looking at the qualifications and your repeated failure of it, and they wouldn't put you out there because now you're a liability. But when it comes to qualifying, we get all worried about the qualification scores. We get all worried about what we're going to do. But the bottom line is, the less time that we spend qualifying, the less time, the less ammo, the less resources that we have to dedicate to qualification, the more time we can actually dedicate to training. And training is where you get to push people to find out what their failures are. What are they good at? What do they need to work on? What is their speed limit? What is their the point in time where they start to fail because they're trying to go too fast? All of these kinds of things. That's what's really important. Training not qualifying. That test of minimum standards, nobody cares. Most plaintiffs' attorneys don't care about qualification either. They care about your training records. They care about your personnel records, but they don't care about qualification scores. They know, hey, in order to graduate from your basic academy, you're going to have to qualify anyway. A lot of states have qualification courses of fire that they're mandated to do. Others, like Oregon, they say that's completely up to your agency. So I think that time, that money, that ammo is much better spent actually training to perform to a much harder or higher standard than it is to spend that time on qualification.
Yeah, right on. And and I'll let you two, you can each go individually. Like, what are your thoughts? And Paolo, I'd be really interested to find out what it's like for you in Italy and what it's like in the EU. And then Alexandra, from your experience as well.
We have a different standard in Italy. We don't have the same qualification type of qualification you have. So in this case, I cannot take my experience here from Italy. We work differently, different law, and this is something make us in a different position, even with the bad guys. So I cannot really speak about qualification in Italy. It's something completely different.
I think any qualification that they're doing there is a little more meaningful than what we tend to do in the States. What we tend to do is a checkbox kind of a proving to administrators that you can handle your firearm without shooting yourself or somebody else. It's sort of the purpose of qualification. I don't know if we're ever going to get away from it because the trainer's mindset is always going to be different than your administrator's mindset. And we need to have some way to quantify to them that, hey, these people can go out and carry these firearms. But as Todd and Joe were saying, it makes more sense to spend that money and spend that time in the training that makes a difference to keeping our people alive and keeping our people doing what they need to learn how to do to survive encounters on the street. So that should really be a minimal thing that we're focusing on. And it's almost an afterthought in training as far as, okay, we walk through this thing that we have to do for the state or for whoever says we have to do it. And then we go and pay attention to the things that are truly important.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And hearing all you guys give your explanations of it, it seems to me like, why aren't we, is it time to change the way we're doing qualifications? If we know that it's really not that effective, it's really not helping us out, it's kind of a waste of time, it's waste of training dollars. Is there a reason to still have it set out the way that it is? And is it the time to change it? Like, what do you guys think?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with where you're from. There are some states that require that you shoot this target this many times a year. It's written into statute or some administrative rule. Then there are states where it's completely up to the agency. And then we've got to overcome the hurdle of changing our stance on qualification, because qualification then to a lot of us or a lot of agencies and a lot of administrators is we qualify because that's the way we've always done it. Mm-hmm. Even though it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of ammo, we could actually use that time, we could use that ammo more effectively to actually train on the live fire range as opposed to some test of minimum standards. But hey, you got a lot of leaders out there that say, I've always had to do it, it's the way it's always been done, I don't want to be the one that makes that call.
There almost seems to be a fear in getting away from it. Again, that whole concept of this is the way we've done things for so long that why should we change it? Or maybe we haven't come up with good enough reasons to push it yet. I don't know. Maybe that's something we can do as instructors, is keep fighting for that.
It seems to me like it just, why with the qualifications the way they are, should there be a change? I mean, we all know it's because of liability, right? Mm-hmm. The quals are there to kind of take care of that liability issue. But could there be an argument made that the way that certain agencies are doing it is actually increasing the liability rather than decreasing the liability? Joe, what do you think?
Me personally, I believe that what every agency should do is they should start with a task analysis. Look at what your people do. One of the things when we use the term qualification, one of the things we look at is that you have to shoot this way at this position, these many rounds, as we were saying, at this specific target. And I think what each agency needs to do is a task analysis. In other words, if you're running a uniformed police department who's out there doing general police service every day, you're making traffic stops, you're responding to thieves stealing at the local convenience store, you're responding to domestic violence runs, a typical uniformed police department. If you do a task analysis of your agency, look at what agencies, either your agency or similar agencies, get involved in when it comes to use of force, and specifically for tonight's conversation, for firearms engagements. Look at what needs to be done. Look at what is happening to the officers. How are they being engaged in firefights? What's happening? And that versus an agency, let's say like a conservation officer, who might find themselves in different circumstances, walking into a camp full of drunk deer hunters with high-powered rifles. They might not have the same type of firearms encounter that a uniformed police officer making traffic stops and responding to domestics would have. So therefore, what we need to do, what every agency needs to do, is sit back and say, who are we? Are we primarily a plainclothes operation that goes up and arrests people on warrants or investigates things? And how are our firearms encounters happening? Once an agency does a task analysis, once they look at how firearms are being used in the line of duty, then they can better suit the needs of their personnel by developing firearms training around their needs and around the most likely encounters they're going to have when it comes to firearms.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? No? Joe, you're too good at answering questions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but what we tend to do in this country, and I'm sure possibly in Italy and I'm sure Canada also, is that there's some governing body that says this is what a law enforcement officer is, and this is how you're going to train them. And for example, in the state of Michigan, we have the Department of Environmental Quality. They now have a new title. Forgive me, they just changed it recently, and I don't know their name. But one of the people that I know that works there says that a lot of their firearms training is done in full hazmat gear with respirators on, because a lot of times they're walking into a toxic environment and dealing with individuals in full hazmat gear with an air pack on. They all sound like Darth Vader when they talk to each other. But my point is, them using a standard qualification that a street cop in Michigan would use doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't help them. That's not their task.
It's kind of like plainclothes detectives showing up on the range wearing body armor that they haven't worn for 4 or 5 years, and a duty belt that they never ever wear. And now all of a sudden they're going to take this test of minimum standards using gear that they never ever used. That makes no sense whatsoever. And to Joe's point, when he talks about the job task analysis, we start looking at the reality of gunfights, what's actually going on out on the street. And all of a sudden in our test of minimum standards, our qualifications, we're putting officers in situations that they're extremely unlikely to ever encounter in a gunfight out on the street. And we're calling it a qualification. If you can do A, then you can carry this gun out on the street, in uniform patrol or in your position as a law enforcement officer. And instead, we're anchoring guys on the range, instead of having them engage in deliberate, very quick movement to get off the line, on moving targets, those kinds of things. And the whole reason we aren't doing that type of a qualification is because it makes it hard on instructors. If you've got guys running all over the place with moving targets, for at least a moving target for every officer on the range, then it makes it harder and a lot longer to do a qualification. So we're still stuck doing what we've always done, which is basically a range Macarena. It's a range dance without purpose, without any training value until we get that done, and then we can train.
Amen.
I'm also going to put something out there that might be a little controversial too. And while we have some departments that are training up to better standards, like what Todd's talking about with doing more movement and having more realistic qualifications, you also have some departments who have gone backwards on their qualifications, because what happens if our guys fail it? So instead of spending the money, the time, and the resources that they need to better train, because it's all capital outlay, they're kind of making the analysis based on maybe not the best decision points. So I think we have to watch out for some of those things too. And again, it's about getting everybody up to a standard where they can actually perform the way that they need to on the street. Yeah,
it's kind of like Jason in Lefia says, qualification should be the easiest thing that you ever do on the range. It's a test of minimum standards. Get them out there. It should be the easiest thing. There's no warm up. Just get them out there, get it done, get it over with, and now train. Actually push their limits. Figure out what we need to do in order to develop skill, in order to make them better, not just at punching holes in paper, but actually better at being gunfighters.
Yeah.
That brings up a really interesting topic. When I was thinking about putting this whole thing together, I want to find a way to get all of your opinions on how do we take somebody who's never touched a firearm before and they get into law enforcement. Could be law enforcement, could be corrections, military, security, whatever. They get into the role where now they're given a firearm and it's going to be part of their equipment when they're on duty. We have to take them and we have to start them from somewhere. They have to start somewhere. Where should that point be? And then how do you effectively train them from that point to winning a gunfight down the road when it actually matters?
Personally, can sound strange, but you need to inoculate passion to people. So when someone chooses a job like police officer or whatever, and you need a gun, and he need a gun, you need to enjoy it. Sorry, my English is not perfect, but you need to like what you do. So every time you go to train yourself, you need to go with passion and with enthusiasm. You cannot take the training like something forced or you're obliged to do. Or for me, because practice makes you perfect, if you shot 1,000 bullets per day, even not a super person can hit the target at the end of the training. But instead of throw away money on 1,000 bullets, find a right instructor or different instructor can create a different exercise. They take you out of your comfort zone and make the training. I want to use this word. I know it's not correct, but make your training funny or fun or have fun. So at the end of the training, you're tired because you move your body, but you learn something only if you're calm, if you're not stressed. This is why I'm against some super tactical training like push-up, pull-up. If you need to learn something, you need to be calm and relax. I don't know if it makes sense, but this is my idea. Maybe Alexandra can help because she knows my way of thinking and her English is better than mine. So,
but bringing the passion into the instruction and getting to the point where we can recognize our students who are engaged and who aren't engaged, and it starts with having an instructor who's willing to bring everything they have to the training, and be as much of a student as they are an instructor in a lot of ways. So they're learning from their students, and they're able to react and to appropriately inspire them to want to do better and to push past maybe their fear of firearms or bad training we've had in the past, or any number of things that our students come to us with. And that's kind of the foundation that we want to work from before we get into the more advanced technique, because we have to get people to the point where, like Todd was just talking about, the Jason says, the qualification should be the easiest part of everything. And the way that you get there is everybody has to get to that level before they can move on. I know we just touched on a ton of different topics there. If any other guys want to go.
I think it's really interesting when we talk about the qualifications being the bare minimum, because I mean, we've all been there and we've seen it. I mean, not for me as an instructor, but I've been an RSO where I watch my instructors on the range, and there's people that can't meet minimum qualification, or it's a struggle the entire time. What happens where, like, there has to be something where an officer comes in, or whether it's a soldier or an officer, doesn't matter. They come in to do this training, and we've seen it time and time again where they don't want to be there. They don't. If they're not mandated to be on the range, they're not going to go. If they're not mandated to go on a run or get on a treadmill, they're not going to do it if they're not getting paid for it. But when we talk about firearms, we're talking about something that when we talk force on force, this is the ultimate option. I mean, if you have to use your firearm to protect yourself or to protect someone else, I mean, that's a very significant escalation. But now we have people that don't take this as seriously as they would defensive tactics training or learning how to use a computer or anything like that. So where's that disconnect? Why are we still finding that officers don't care about going to the range? They don't care about even shooting when they don't have to.
I think a lot of it comes back to the firearms culture that we've established on the range over time. When I first started in law enforcement, it was very rigid, very structured, very kind of military. And that may work fine with 17, 18, 19-year-olds fresh out of high school. But when you're dealing with, some adults that actually have some life experience, yelling at them just doesn't work. So now all of a sudden they come out on the range, they have a negative feedback, or they have a negative experience throughout their introduction to firearms. And now we ask ourselves, well, how come they don't like coming to the range? Why do they always come to the range fearing what's going to happen? Well, it's because we as instructors have engaged in belittling them, embarrassing them, yelling at them, and nobody likes any of those things. So yeah, I would think that going to the range in that environment would kind of suck. So I think that us as instructors, we got to recognize that. We've got to own that. And once we own that, then we can work on changing the atmosphere, the learning environment out on the range. Once they enjoy coming out, then all of a sudden it becomes something that they want to do, that they look forward to doing. They're not going to come out. They're not going to get embarrassed. They're not going to be belittled. And it's absolutely possible to train to your all-stars. Make sure that your all-star shooters are getting all the training that they need to push their skills while not embarrassing your lower performing shooters out on the range. And a lot of it has to do with changing their attitudes towards the range, because we've changed the learning environment. But we got to start with us. If we don't own that as being our problem, if we don't own it as being the root cause of the problem, then it's never going to change. But once we make it something that they enjoy doing, they'll come out and they'll learn and they'll have a good time, and we can make it fun.
I think Todd hit it right on the head there. In the past, we did take more of a militaristic viewpoint of how we did firearms training, but in reality, it's 2020, and we have to look at the fact that we are dealing with task-specific adult learners who have volunteered to come into a profession to go in harm's way of people they have never met before, to keep those people safe and alive. And I think we have to rethink, as Todd was saying, the instructor mentality. The old school, do it because I'm telling you to do it, won't work anymore. Through the magic of formats like YouTube and other videos that we have available to us, we can start a class, a live fire class, by, let's say we're dealing with close quarter shootings. We can get a myriad of actual videos of cops in close quarter spontaneous shootings from the internet and show them to our students. Our goal isn't just to improve performance. That's not going to happen if they feel like you're forcing it down their throat. Our goal is to get them into a competence and confidence feedback loop, a loop where they start saying, oh, you know what, the instructor didn't yell at me. I shot that course of fire a little bit better this time than I usually do, and they were really positive about it. They weren't negative at all. And, I didn't mind doing that. I'm going to try and do a little better. And as we improve their competence, we improve their confidence. As their confidence increases mentally, they start feeling better about themselves because they are doing better and they want to do even more. So our goal as an instructor is first to create the need for whatever skill we're teaching: firearms, hand-to-hand, emergency vehicle operation, any core critical skill that will keep that student alive. It's our goal to create a need for it. We motivate them by showing them, in this case, in this day and age, modern videos, current videos of officers involved in critical incidents, and say, look, it does happen. Then you can run a screen up from LEOCA, law enforcement officers killed and assaulted, and say, here's the numbers. Here's what happened this many times last year. And we'll find that somewhere between 70 and 80+% of the time, the shootings are close quarter spontaneous shootings. So as we show them videos of close quarter spontaneous shootings, now our students realize, holy cow, this could happen to me. And it can happen fast, and I better be able to keep myself alive. So we create the need as instructors, and it's paramount upon us to create the need, but to also present the skill set in a viable manner for a task-specific adult learner who volunteered to come into this profession and risk their lives for others. So we have to let them know the risk is there, and we have to teach them and get them to buy into the fact that we will help keep them alive in this type of encounter. So it's really all about how we motivate our students nowadays. And the old, God bless his soul, R. Lee Ermey method, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, those days should be long gone. You might get away with it at the academy, but even at the academy, when I break down into teaching individual techniques or tactics to the students, including firearm stuff, I do it as a, look, I've been there, I've been in these encounters, here's videos of these encounters still going on today. You're going to need to know this. Pay attention. Let's get to it. It is not, what is your major malfunction? You're jerking the trigger. You're doing that. Your grip is all right. It's not about that. When I approach a student, it's like, hey, that's not bad. They could be the worst shooter on the planet. But I'm going to approach them and say, that's not bad. You want to tune it up a little bit? You want to make it even better than you're already doing? Because let's face it, some of our students initially, they don't shoot groups. They don't even shoot gatherings. Their targets look like a bad family reunion, and it's up to us to try and fix that for them. But we can only do that if we get them to understand that it very much can happen to them, and they have to help us along the road.
I find it really interesting that in the IDPA USPSA 3-gun world, that we've got people come out on the range for the first time with a very low skill level, and they keep coming back, right? The shooting sports are becoming more and more popular. So what are we doing in the competitive world that we aren't doing in the law enforcement world out on the range? We're making a bad environment, a bad learning atmosphere out in the law enforcement ranges, and yet in IDPA, you come out, you get oftentimes, depending on what club you're shooting with, you'll get somebody to work with you and mentor you as far as the rules and the safety procedures and those kinds of things. It's really laid back. It's low stress, even though you're shooting at a low skill level on the range in front of people, maybe for the first time ever, and somebody's running a shot timer and all of a sudden they're coming back. But in law enforcement, we have trouble just paying them to come out on the range. It's being able to shoot other people's ammo and get paid for it should be every cop's dream. And yet we struggle because they don't want to be there. Out on the IDPA, USPSA, and 3-gun range, they keep coming back.
I'm going to say some of that is some of it is our traditional police culture that becomes problematic for us as instructors and as police officers. And I know that there's fear these days about going too far into the safe space territory where, oh God, we're treating people like they're all delicate flowers. And it's not about that. I like the idea of creating more of a brave space in our training where trainers can be honest about their feedback, and the feedback goes back and forth between the students and the instructors. And again, we're getting away from that whole style where it's this yelling, jumping up and down, you did something wrong, as opposed to, hey, let's work on this and make it better together, like Joe was talking about. I think that also goes to the passion that Paolo was talking about, and this whole concept where the instructors should keep on learning and bringing better information, more information. We need to keep our quest going for the things that we bring into our training to help inspire that sense of wonder and like he was saying, fun. That this should be at least a good learning experience. And maybe we still have students who aren't entirely comfortable with firearms, but we can at least get them to a point where the fear is less, and they have the idea that they can handle a situation that they come up against. Should at least be one of our goals.
It's interesting just listening to you guys all explain this. I mean, it sounds to me like gamification of training. So turning it into some type of game competition with the people that you have in your class so that they're engaged and actively want to participate in that game. Now that can obviously be harder with people that are, a little bit longer in the tooth. Sometimes, like we said, they just don't want to be there. But I mean, are there certain things that each of you do in your training courses that you've found that really help to engage your students?
Yeah, I think so. I think that in all of our classes, one of the things that we like to do is to make sure that as instructors, we're there to facilitate the learning. But we want to get them engaged, because if they're engaged, they're gonna walk away with more information. And the way to get them engaged is to get them to buy in right off the bat that they are important, and that we are not the end all do all experts at the front of the class. The guy wearing the red shirt and carrying a Sharpie. That we want their feedback. We want their criticism. We want their constructive criticism. We want the good, the bad, the ugly. Help us make this better. And I think that as long as we get them engaged in kind of that continuous feedback loop, as opposed to us just always telling them what they're doing wrong, then I think the results are going to be much better.
Yeah, you'll get guys who maybe haven't been engaged for years, that you start getting them more directly involved and set some expectations for them and encourage them to get there, and they get inspired again. They start having a good time with their training again. I found that works.
Yeah, and I'm not sure your term gamification. I understand it, and I know where you're coming from, but I definitely make them understand that it's no game. Now, don't get me wrong. Human beings, many human beings like to compete with one another, and friendly competition can improve skills if somebody wants to, quote unquote, beat the other person's score or time or both. But from the get-go, just a few weeks ago, I was teaching a block on spontaneous attacks with a knife. And I started the class by saying, look, everybody says it's not going to happen to me. And I showed them a video of a police captain in Ohio attacked by a truck driver with a screwdriver. He literally leapt out of his truck onto the captain, stabbed him twice in the neck. The captain tactically retreats, gets his firearm out, and puts 11 rounds into the bad guy. So I don't know that I'd call it a gamification, although I appreciate the terminology. I understand where you're coming from. but it's definitely motivation. An instructor's goal is to create a need for the skill, make the student understand that what we're teaching today is an important skill set that you need to keep yourself alive. And in the process of creating the skill, our goal is to create motivation. If gaming or the gamification aspect helps motivate them, then I'm all for that term. But at the same time, at some point in this training, we have to let them know this is deadly serious. You've got to go home to your family every day. Whether we're talking about how to prepare for the COVID-19 virus and what to do on duty to keep yourself from coming down with it, or we're talking about a running gun battle with a bad guy. It's all about the motivation factor.
Maybe I use wrong the term fun, maybe for game, whatever. No,
I even agree with using the term fun. I think training should be fun, even if it's deadly serious training. We can't keep them in that negative mindset for hours at a time. That's going to burn anybody out. So I totally agree with your concept of fun. Fun's a great idea. Training can be fun, but it can also be fun training that will keep me alive if somebody's trying to kill me.
of course. This is
I
the goal,
totally
I think.
fun concept.
Yeah, my thought with that was, from my experience, for example, I mean, when we trained with the military, we shot figure 11 targets, right? So you get up to the range, it didn't matter what system you were running, we shot figure 11 targets. There was a huge difference for me from going to shooting figure 11 targets to shooting steel plates, because you get that automatic feedback and you get the, you fire, you get the ting, you fire, you get the ting. When you're shooting paper targets, you're not getting any feedback. So it's more, when I use the gamification, I mean, it's a lot different to try to get somebody to hit 6 shots center mass than it is to get them to knock down 6 plates in 6 shots. That's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, no, and that's phenomenal, because when we look at the performance psychology issues involved in there, those steel targets, those knockdown targets that drop, as soon as the student hits that target, they do get instant feedback. That instant feedback immediately gives them a boost in their confidence because their competence was there. Every time they hit their target and they hear that ping or the target falls over, their brain goes, man, you did it just right. You did a good thing. And as that happens, and as, again, although their skill is physically improving, emotionally, their brain's also saying, man, that was awesome. You did a good job. Let's do that some more. And the competence feedback loop generates a desire to do more in the human brain. Any performance psychologist would tell you that. The better you do, the better you want to do, and the better you feel about it. And that's the perfect cycle we want them into. And if we need to, quote, have fun to do that, that's awesome.
This is why I think, personally, during the training, use a mix of target, metal and steel every time, not only metal or only paper. And because people take more passion to see the quick result, and instead of run and wait and take a look about the target, or someone do some BS like take a shot outside. With metal target, you cannot do it. If you hit the target, you hear or fall down. You need to pay attention. So using both is my goal. So the risk became go to the too much sport corner of the shooting, like sorry, go ahead.
No.
I lost my words.
It's okay. You don't want to lose the mission of the training. So to go too far into the sporting aspect of it, too far into we're competing with each other and losing track and focus of the entire purpose, but mixing up the targets and making sure that we're adding things in, like everybody's been talking about, to make it more interesting to our students. I'm also going to propose too that for different students being conscious of the type of style that they respond to most, because you still are going to have maybe some of your old school students who respond to the Army style, And that's okay for them. It's just, we shouldn't be generalizing, I think, anybody in our classes, in the sense that if we see somebody who's obviously not responding to what we're putting out there, we need to be evaluating ourselves and be humble enough to change up our styles, or to remember that, hey, some people are going to receive information in different ways.
See, and I totally agree with what everybody said about mixing up targets. On one thing about using steel targets, though, is that oftentimes people use steel targets that are too large, and so they're not getting the training value that they really should be getting by testing themselves with smaller size targets. So instead of using a 16-inch circle piece of steel, make it a 8 or 10-inch piece of steel. That's more realistic. Mix in some 6-inch pieces of steel instead of always using the larger torso type of steel targets. And when it comes to competition on the range, I think competition can be good, the kind of gamification thing, but we're training law enforcement officers, and that is absolutely deadly serious. And if we overuse competition, that can be detrimental to the process, because your lower skill level shooters aren't going to want to put themselves out there all the time in a competitive environment. So you got to be kind of careful how you do that. Specialized teams, SWAT teams, drug teams, traffic teams, these kinds of things that are highly competitive anyway. That's a great format for more competition type of training classes. Beginner students, I kind of stay away from the competition thing with new shooters until they get to a point where now they're starting to compete within themselves anyway, and then we may mix something in, but you got to be careful how you use that competition.
I totally agree with that. The last thing we want to do is demotivate our students, and that's what, as Todd was saying, and I agree with him. If we make shooting a big competition and we've got some low end shooters, it will demotivate them, and so part of the aspect is we've got to improve the individual, and we have to deal with them as individuals. I came from an agency where we had 160 officers to train, and now I'm working for an agency where we have 1,400 officers to train, and we've got a higher percentage of low end shooters. And when I watch them on the line shooting with other officers that are decent to good shooters, and you can just see it as they're picking up their magazines at the end of the run. You can just see it in their face that they're just down in the dumps because everybody's out shooting them. So a lot of times I'll take that individual student, and when everybody's gone, I'll run them through the course again and try and get their confidence through their competence up high again, so that they want to come back. My agency, we shoot every month, and the last thing I want somebody doing is leaving the range demotivated, because we all know then they've got 29 more days to sit back and say, oh man, I got to go to the range. And we all want just the opposite. We want that student saying, man, I can't wait till we can shoot again. Because again, I'll use that term because that was fun. I enjoyed it. I shot well. I shot the course of fire, and I did it well. And I want to do that again. And I want to see what we're going to do next month. What's next month's course of fire? So that's our goal. And you're right. Competition can demotivate your low end shooters, and we don't want that.
That brings up an interesting point for me, because we're kind of now getting into what should we be doing as far as training. I mean, for agencies like Joe, like you were saying, you guys shoot once a month. I don't know how many people that are going to listen to this or watch this where they're like, well, shit, we only go to the range once a year. If you had the opportunity to say, hey, listen, every police agency in North America or every police agency in the world has to train X amount of days, what would you guys think is that sweet spot when it comes to making sure that their skill level is up to par?
Are we talking about something that's actually realistic, or are we talking pie in the sky?
Okay, let's go something that would be more realistic.
See, I am an advocate of increased frequency, decreased duration. You know, I know a lot of agencies where they may go to the range like once or twice a year, and it's for 8 hours at a time. And I got to tell you that there's not a lot of retention once they leave the range as far as the skill level that was developed. So if in a perfect world, I would say that if we got them out to the range for an hour or 45 minutes to an hour twice a month, and you gave me 50 rounds each time, I would be a happy camper. That'd be great. We'd be able to really do a lot to increase their skill level on demand, and I guarantee you that they would retain more of that skill level between training sessions than that twice a year for 8 hours at a time.
Paulo, how about you? When you're talking about training that you guys are doing in the UK, is it any different, or are you guys still doing the once a year type thing?
UK.
In Italy.
No, I love my flag, and I don't want to say anything against my country, but our situation is bad. Not about COVID-19 right now, also for that, but because we have a completely different mentality than you. I'm talking about the United States. I think, I don't want to say anything wrong, but it's about 50 rounds per year is the by the administration per year, 50 rounds. I don't do my warm up with 50 rounds because I like shooting, of course, but and we need to create. This is why I think be in an instructor community like a lot of your association here in the United States is create a sort of global instruction, so where we are on the same level to take the same words to the student and improve their skills. In Italy, if you don't pay by your wallet, the state don't give you money for training, except for, of course, special guy and special police officer. We don't have SWAT, but we have GIS and NOCs from the state police. They are super trained, but the first responder, what we call the normal police officer, no, we are bad. Not because students are bad or police officer don't want, but if I need to pay by my wallet the training, there's something wrong, and it's not police officer fault. Again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, Alexandra, I'd like to get your opinion on this too, but we have, I mean, that speaks to a lot to what we talk about and what we've talked about on this show in the past, where, you know, officers have to pay out of pocket for their training, you know, and why is that still a thing, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest, you know, issue for everybody is if there's officers that are wanting to do the training, why are agencies saying, no, this is your allocated amount of rounds for the year, that's it? I mean, I have buddies that are in agencies up here in Canada, and here's what happens. They get allotted a certain amount of rounds per year, and some of them are like, I don't want them, and then they'll give them off, slough them off to somebody else. So somebody ends up with hundreds and hundreds of rounds, and somebody will end up with just what they need to do their qualifications. So, I mean, yeah, I'll take them, but I mean, that's just it. So why is that kind of stuff still happening?
Well, I think part of the reason is just to jump in here real quick is, you know, I don't think any of us want to live in a area where we're paying so much in taxes that all the taxpayers are going to fund all the training that we need or think we need, all right, that we think we need, because, you know, I would love to have the you know, somebody give me, you know, 40,000 rounds a year to play with, and I know that that's not going to happen. But you know, when it comes to funding some of our own training out of our own pocket, man, I've been doing that for 25 years. And, you know, going to ILETA, my agency's never paid for me to go to ILETA. But I think that, you know, the bottom line is we choose this career our family didn't choose this career for us. Our friends didn't choose this career for us. The people that we care about didn't choose this career for us. So we owe it to them not to suck. And if we choose to suck, then that's kind of on us. But I do agree that our agencies need to allot more training time, more training money, more ammo to get skill level up to a competent level. But I don't think that when it comes to our agencies spending all this money to make sure that every officer gets 10,000 rounds a year to shoot, that's just not realistic. It's not going to happen.
It brings up another point, and we're going to end up jumping into this, so we might as well do it now. There's a difference between live fire training, simulated training, and force-on-force training. Where can those be used to supplement officer training when the budget isn't there for live rounds, or maybe the time isn't there to do live fire? Who wants to take that one to start with?
Well, I can start out with it and tell you that we recently built a new police station and put a virtual system in it, and it is going to be, I think, a great tool for us to be able to supplement our range training, because we don't have to spend the money on the ammunition. I mean, obviously there's the outlay for the equipment, but once you have well-qualified trainers who can debrief the scenarios properly, and I think that's one of the critical parts of it, getting your people through it and allowing them the time to do that as they have the interest. So not only the official training, but allowing them to say, hey, I was going to spend some time on the range, but can we go and run through some scenarios, is going to be a great supplement and way for them to get into that decision-making type training that prior to that, when we do force-on-force scenarios, for example, we have to dedicate a building and dedicate Sims rounds and the weapons to use with those, all the protective gear and the time and all the stuff that goes into that, which has its place. It's great. But the simulated stuff is going to give us a lot more flexibility to do it more frequently. So I think it's super beneficial. And so what we can do on the range, as well as the other end with the force-on-force scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that. My professional opinion is that live fire punching holes in paper targets, as we said earlier, qualification, is really about 10% of what an officer needs to know to survive an actual gun battle. So I think systems like the Virtua simulator or similar systems, I think force-on-force, and to be honest, even the CERT pistol, laser pistols, I think those are all incredible tools that we can use, especially with those students that they don't mind learning survival skills or combative pistol skills or long gun skills. They just don't like the live fire portion of it. I think things like laser trainers, to some degree, even blue gun training, when we talk about tactics, how to clear a building, things like that, a laser pistol, simunitions, even a blue gun, and folding that into our firearms training is very relevant, and it's very important for the student, because again, just shooting on that two-dimensional range doesn't give them a full understanding of combat handgun or combat long gun tactics. They've got to be in the arena.
Yeah, I agree with what they said. I'm a big supporter of the simulators. I'm like Virtua and Milo. I'm a big proponent of reality-based training, but it doesn't take the place of live fire training on the range when it comes to skill development. When it comes to actually shooting live rounds downrange, developing the skill that it takes to make those rounds go when and where you want them to go, that requires training on the live fire range. You can't simulate with in reality-based training, whether you're using FX marking cartridges or another product. You can't simulate the recoil. You can't simulate the feel of the gun. You can't simulate the velocity of the slide during recoil. All of those things change. even the sound is different. So it takes the live fire range to do that. It takes a live fire range to, even as good as a cert pistol is on training reloads, it takes a live fire range to really get that type of weapon handling skill up to par. Once you have developed the skills, once you have continuously worked to improve those skills, then you start to go into the simulators where you're working on use of force decision making. You get into reality-based training where you're kind of putting all of those skills that you learned on the live fire range, skills that you learned in CIT training, skills that you learned in the use of force decision making training, kind of all into play in reality-based training. But those two things can't take the place of live fire. I actually had a new officer at an agency qualify in the Sally Port of the police department using marking cartridges.
No.
Okay. Now, qualification, again, test of minimum standards, don't really care about that. But is it really testing minimum standards with live ammunition if really what you're doing is shooting force-on-force ammo? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Is this for me the scene gun, force on force or defensive technique is the step ahead when the student have I don't want to say super decent level because I'm not correct, but when you have enough skills live fire, you can mix with scene gun or force on force, or some people, in my humble opinion, and with my experience, a lot of time when I see force on force training, now is the word fun is using in the wrong in the wrong way. So they have fun. So nobody hurt. I shot you, you shot me. I don't care about the space in real and what happened because it's like a game. I see some video about force on force around the car, and it's like see airsoft guys playing together in the wood. It's something not really
Training value.
yes, without training value. Exactly. Sorry.
I would agree with both comments from Todd and Paolo both. My humble opinion, if they can't shoot a real gun on the range and shoot it well, what cert pistols do, what Vertra does, what force on force does is teach tactics. And I'll define that so everybody knows where I'm coming from. It teaches the tactics of getting the gun to the gunfight, whether we're talking about clearing a room, clearing a corner, making a traffic stop and approaching on the passenger side. Those are all tactics to get the gun into the gunfight if there's going to be a gunfight. But only shooting that real gun on the range is going to allow them to shoot a real gun in a shootout. So I agree with both of you that it's
one of the big drawbacks of force on force training, and when I say force on force, I don't care what you're using, whether it's airsoft or FX marking cartridges or the force on force ammo or whatever, UTM, it doesn't make any difference. One of the big drawbacks of reality-based training is the fact that there's still no expectation of serious physical injury or death if you fail. That can be good in a training environment, but it can also lead to kind of that it's just a game. It's airsoft. It's paintball. So you've got to be really careful how you approach this. Without that expectation of serious physical injury or death, officers are going to be doing things that they normally wouldn't be doing because they know that really it's a paintball game. So you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that this kind of brings to mind is when we talk about building out dynamic scenario training, it comes down to the level of competency of the instructor, and they have to understand how to correctly build out the scenarios so that you're not doing a detriment to the student. For example, I mean, if we're doing like CQC training, whether it's with sim rounds or with something like a stress vest or something like that, there has to be something built in there. It's too often we see this where somebody will run through a scenario. You'll go through a building, or you'll go through clearing a house or a room or a level, and then as soon as it's done, it's okay, and X reset. It's like, okay, well, if we were literally firing live rounds and we're actually building on a dynamic scenario, where's the, where are we doing the self check, the buddy check? Where are we doing the casualty care? Securing the area, all of the different types of things that happen after an actual force on force altercation. But in training, those aren't being done in a lot of cases. So where does that responsibility lie? Does it lie on the organization? Does it lie on the instructor? Where do you guys think that should fall?
It relies on us. We own that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm asking a question because I'm just trying to open up the discussion point here. But I mean, that's for me. I mean, my experience being with the military, we've done, we did FIBUA, we did CQC stuff. But a lot of times, like you were talking about, we started from day one. I mean, our training was built out over the course of a year. So if we're doing everything from learning how to handle your firearm correctly. So we're doing so much dry training that we do dry training for 6 months before we even get the guys out on a range. Or maybe we're doing shooting blanks in the back 40. And then we move into the actual live range. And then we move into individual live fire, team live fire, section live fire, platoon and company live fire. And it progresses as we go through the training cycles. From a law enforcement perspective, how should we be building out those training cycles so that we're not just repeating the same stuff every single year and there's actually some type of growth in the skill level of the student?
That's actually the first part of it, in my opinion, is that you have a strategic plan in your firearms training. So it's not simply, oh, wait, it's time to qualify again. It's a surprise every year. But there should be a progression to what you're teaching people, and to, again, it's like a strategic plan for your firearms training and where you want people to be in 5-10 years, and all of those things should be building on the last lesson.
Yeah. Todd, when you guys are putting together your training courses, what is the first thing that you do when you're going into an agency? What do they supply you with? Like, hey, this is what we're doing right now, or do you kind of come in with your own thing saying, hey, listen, this is how we do training. It's different than what you're doing, and here's why?
It depends on what the expectations are of that agency. Generally speaking, program, they don't want us to regurgitate already know. So our job is to do things maybe in a different way, maybe get them to think in a different way, then to
Todd, I'm gonna
reconsider what be true.
Yeah, I didn't really catch too much of that. I don't know about the rest of you guys. I think we got a little laggy on that one.
Yep. No, it seemed that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you repeat yourself there, Todd?
Yeah, no problem. When we go into a department, the departments don't really want us to teach them what they already know. So when we go in, really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get their instructors to perform at a higher level. We're trying to get them to question what they know to be true. We want to develop critical thinkers. We want them to reevaluate what they do and how they do things and take a fresh look at it. But I think we've really overcomplicated firearms training, and when it comes to teaching the basic, essential, fundamental skills of marksmanship, it's become some mystical thing, and really it's pretty simple. It's shooting platform, sights, trigger, right? Shooting platform, how they interact with the gun, their grip, those types of things, how they see their sights, and how they work the trigger. And we show them ways to simplify it, both from the instructor standpoint, from the student standpoint. Instructors, one of the things that I think instructors struggle with the most is diagnosing shooters, providing them actual accurate feedback into what they're doing at the gun and what they can change in order to improve the results downrange. Being able to diagnose a shooter is absolutely critical, and most instructors aren't very good at it. and it's because we overcomplicate it. You know, if we have 5 to 7 fundamentals of marksmanship, how many possible combinations could be going wrong, as opposed to let's break it down to 3 things and get the instructor and the shooter to think that way. And so that's kind of what we do, and what we want to do when we go in to work with an agency's instructors, or instructors are coming to our class. You know, we want to get them to be able to simplify it, to build better shooters, get shooters to understand what it takes to make accurate hits, and then get shooters to kind of increase their combative speed and accuracy, their ability to make accurate hits under combat time duress. So if you've got a short period of time and you've got to get multiple accurate shots on target in order to stop the fight, then what do we do to get those shooters to be more accurate much quicker? And then how do we develop courses of fire that, again, challenge our all-star shooters without overwhelming our beginning shooters? It's kind of what we do.
Yeah, I want to read one thing here real quick, and this was one of the comments that was sent. So this was sent in by Jason Wustenberg. Now, if somebody's watching this, they don't know who he is. He's the executive director for the National Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors Association, and here's what he had just sent to me real quickly in a message. He said, a 40 or 80-hour firearms instructor certification course does not teach a person everything they should know to run a complete firearms training program. Let's talk about that for a minute, because, I mean, that's what we want to do here, is help the instructors that maybe aren't at the level of you guys or some of the higher level people around the country. Where do instructors need to start, and what is that minimum standard?
So what I'll start off on this one. I call the typical instructor, and understand the academy I teach at, we run a 40-hour pistol instructor school. And in my humble opinion, although we do the best we can in 40 hours, I like to call these people 40-hour wonders. And what I find at the end of the week is they're much better shooters, but they don't know a lot about teaching people how to shoot. They don't understand performance psychology. They don't understand the motivational perspectives. They understand grip, stance, sight alignment, and better. They're much better shooters, but we don't emphasize enough, in my humble opinion, at least here in Michigan, we don't emphasize enough of, this is how you teach. This is how you look for your shooters to have problems. This is how you diagnose them. This is how you help them. In my state, they tend to graduate being a better shooter, but not necessarily a very good instructor.
I absolutely agree with where he's coming from. I went through the first firearms course I went through, is the 40-hour, stamp, and everything I've learned about being an instructor, as I continue to learn about being an instructor, has been from finding other firearms classes, other instructors who could mentor me. But it's also about going outside of the firearms world and finding other information about human factors, about the psychology of teaching, coaching, finding other people whose styles work and who seem to catch their audience and appeal to them, and learning from as many people as I can. And some of that also goes to attending classes where you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be anything like that instructor, and learning the things you don't want to do. Did you have anything to add?
Jason's absolutely right. Being an instructor doesn't start, or does actually just start with the 40 or 80 hour initial instructor development class, but that's not where it ends. But unfortunately, a lot of the check writers think that, hey, you're an instructor now, you don't need any more training. And that's unfortunate, because, once you've got that instructor certification, just enough to be kind of dangerous to your students. It's time to go out and start learning how to actually be a teacher, how to be a trainer, how to be a coach, going out to, organizations like ILETA and going to the annual conference, going to ILFE's annual training conference, joining in Lefia and going to some of the Lefia trainings. Those provide an opportunity to maybe see a different approach, talk to and listen to different instructors, and take what worked on their range and see if you can make it work for you. Go to places like Gunsight. Go take a class from Dave Spalding or Chris Serino. Go take classes from former military guys like Haley or Pat McNamara, and see where not only your shooting skills lie, but see if you can pick up some more instructor tidbits in order to be a better instructor, because your job is to find solutions for your students. And if you're not finding solutions for your students, you're just teaching the same old stuff that we've been teaching for 150 years in exactly the same way, which resulted in the poor hit rate that we've already got.
That brings up a really interesting point about, learning from. One person here has actually had the chance to work with Rex Applegate. So Joe, I want to ask you, what was it like attending having him be your instructor and learning from somebody like that?
Wow. Well, thanks for asking that in loving memory of the Colonel. So the viewers know, and my fellow participants know, I was actually attending a police conference in St. Louis trying to get more training. And I was walking through the vendors area as part of that conference. And Colonel Applegate was standing at a booth for body armor. And I knew the owner of the body armor company, and he introduced me to Colonel Applegate, and I was just in awe. So my first session with Colonel Rex Applegate was sitting in his hotel room that night with him talking about close quarter. And again, earlier in this podcast, we talked about motivating people and doing a task analysis. Of course, Applegate was famous during World War II as being a member of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, our first real spy network. And then in 1947, when the OSS was disbanded, he went to work in Mexico, supposedly importing guns in Mexico to sell. But that was actually just a front for the CIA, who he was working for at the time. And anyway, with that said, Colonel Applegate's world, his environment wasn't of a uniformed police officer responding to domestics or making traffic stops. He was always a spy. And so everything happened to him pretty much up close and personal, toes to toes, nose to nose. So here we sit in a hotel room one night in St. Louis, and he starts telling me what it's like to kill somebody up close with a handgun, with a revolver specifically. You could bury it in their ribs and pull the trigger 5 times and it would keep working. Up close with a knife, the way he had to do things at the time. But he also had some running gun battles while he was in Mexico. So it was fascinating to hear from a guy who, for me, looking at it as whether I'm at a domestic or on a traffic stop, I'm probably going to have a close quarter shooting. I could really relate to what he was telling me. And then it wasn't too long after that, I got a chance to go to Hocking College in Nelsonville, Ohio, which is where Colonel Rex put on his official Applegate point shooting instructor school, which was 40 hours long. Well, 45, 50 hours long. It was a week-long class. You already had to be a firearms instructor to get into it. But then we went through the formal training. But many more times after that, I was lucky to know the Colonel for 8 years. Met him in 1990. He passed away July 14th, 1998. And the first year I saw him, I was teaching at the Advanced Law Enforcement Training Camp, ILET in Provo, Utah, and the Colonel was there. And he did a lecture on point shooting, and there were not a lot of fans in that part of the country. More people had been to Gunsight than had been to his training. So they literally booed him and walked out of the presentation. And I promised him that I would come back the next year and teach his point shooting program. And he said, Joseph, I don't think they want that. But I did. I came back, and with the help of Bruce Siddle, who I've trained with since 1985, we came up with a great title for the program, because when I said I wanted to teach point shooting at ILET, they said, no, we don't need it. So we taught a class called, the physiological aspects of close quarter shootings and training techniques that overcome them. And for the next 7 years in a row, I came back to full classes and taught Applegate's point shooting system. So learning from the Colonel was quite a privilege and an honor. He had seen the elephant more than once, both during the war and then in Mexico after the war. He had been involved in several close quarter shootings. So training with Colonel Applegate was very special. He He was very passionate about anybody who legally carried a gun knowing how to use it. Law enforcement, corrections, military, civilian, he didn't care. If you carried a gun to keep yourself alive, he wanted you to know how to use it. And he was very motivational and very funny. Part of my teaching style, the way I present today, is because of Colonel Applegate.
See, I think that's super important when we talk about going to different training schools and learning from other instructors. That allows us to kind of incorporate some of their styles into what we do out on the range. So I think that's one of the critical reasons to seek outside training instead of just doing the same old thing that we've always been doing.
Yeah, the colonel. One of the colonel's quotes was, "When you can tell what they had for dinner, and you're having a shootout with them or a knife fight, then you know it's close." So.
Yeah, the bad breath distance. I like the way he puts it.
Yeah, no, he was. It was. I've been very lucky in my life. I met Bruce Little in '85, and Bruce Little's really big into the science of survival, and looking at human performance and human performance factors, and then I got to combine that with Colonel Applegate's techniques, and it was. I'm a very lucky guy. Some people want to have big cars or fast boats or expensive houses. I'm just happy to be me and, have 43 years on the job and still moving along and still training cops and having trained with people like Colonel Applegate and Bruce Little. So.
Paulo, in Italy, what are your opportunities to train with other instructors and to improve your instructor abilities, your instructor knowledge?
Another question?
Yeah, what do you do in Italy?
No, another question was a joke. No,
Yeah.
this is why I travel a lot. This is why I travel a lot, because except for Joe behind on my side, this world is running by men, and when you need to deal with I don't know if I can say this, but high level of testosterone, it's always, oh, I'm better than you. I shot better than you. My experience is better than I was in Iraq or whatever. I'm not here for tell you how many people I kill in my life or how many bad guy I stop. I'm here to help you to improve your skills and give the right or a different path to follow or improve your again accuracy and whatever you need. And I don't want to be an but in Italy it's very very difficult to do this because a lot of former people, just because they are former something, they pretend to have the quality to teach. Again, I don't care. I can stay with the king and play with the king and stay what I am. He is the king, not me. I stay what I am. I'm what I am, and this is why I prefer or I'm in love of the United States because I have the opportunity since 19 years ago, 12 years ago, no, 20 years ago right now, to meet special person can teach me how to do my job and sometimes steal something, always give the right credit. So every time I steal your exercise thought, I say, it's coming from one of my students in, in United States. There's no sense to steal something without give the credit. And this is my way of teaching and my way of sharing training experience. And it's what I think.
So it's kind of like drawing a network of all of the best from a variety of instructors. As you do that, you learn what you can from all of the people that you get to encounter. And I think part of what he's talking about is just that he's had better experiences in the States finding instructors who want to share and learning from different people than he has overseas in general. And I mean, we're fortunate here. We've got a lot of really great instructors out there who have a lot to share, and I think you can learn a lot from all of them. And then it's super cool from my end to hear, stories about Colonel Applegate. I mean, people that I never got a chance to train with. I mean, I started this my career 23 years ago. So I mean, it was like right at the end of those legends. But it's an amazing thing to know that there are still things that they were training in those days that we can use now, and we use their attitude, their techniques, their all of the contributions that they made to what we try to push forward to our students now. So I think we all do better as we try to work together on this to develop as instructors, collectively, instead of turning it into a competition in general. But that's my approach.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big values of going to conferences like the ILFE Annual Training Conference or the ILETA Conference. Little Joe, like you were saying, your conversation with the colonel, that kind of your first training occurred in the hallway or after the class or after after dinner or during dinner. That's kind of the big value of a lot of these training conferences like the ILFE Annual Training Conference or the ILETA Conference.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
Could you share a little bit about your experiences at ILETA? Because ILETA and ILFE, I think, are the two conferences that I attend on a regular basis, where I see some of the best instructors in the world that show up to learn from one another without ego. It's awesome.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
That's the key. That's the key. And as you're addressing, it's not just a class itself, the formal classroom time, as you know, because you've been to many conferences too. It's when we sit in the hotel lobby, me quaffing a root beer because I don't really drink, but having the whatever adult beverage of your choice you want to have, be it A&W or a fine wine, and just sitting and just chewing the fat with people. And that's when the little questions come up that didn't come up in their classroom. Hey, what do you do with somebody who walks in and sits in the back of the classroom before you even get on the range? And as they're sitting back there with their arms folded, they don't want to be there. They don't want to qualify. How do you handle that? And listening and when you sit with these legends, when you sit with people like Dave Spalding or Chris Serino, who are legends, modern day legends, when I had the ability to sit with Colonel Applegate, once people would realize who he was, then more people would start to gather around. And then more people would give us feedback. Well, I had a student do that once, and this is what I said to them. And what happened? Well, they joined the group. I'm like, oh. And they actually, they went out there and shot and did well. Oh, and so it's that networking that helps, because as we sit here and there's 4 faces on the screen, we have combined well over 100 years of experience. But, and I don't mean any of us are old, it's just a combination, right? I mean, 20, 40, 80 years experience. But with that said, when you go to a conference like ILFE or ILETA or your local state conferences, even, they're excellent too. Because when you go to a state conference, what gets discussed is all the state rules and regulations. Right. So especially if you're a new 40-hour wonder who just got out of a pistol instructor school, start with your state conferences, because that's where other instructors that have to deal with the same requirements that you do can help you. Oh, this is how I took care of that problem. This is how I took care of that problem. But back to sitting with legends, I mean, so many people that I had a chance over the years to sit with at different firearms or use of force conferences. And again, a big group would gather in to listen to what they'd say. And then they'd come up with an answer for you. Oh, I remember when that happened to me and I did this and it worked really good. And it could be an experience that even Colonel Applegate didn't have, because again, his core expertise was very limited to being a spy during World War II, or for a short period, he protected the president, to working overseas and training OSS operators. And then again, being basically a spy himself, if you will, keeping an eye on the reason he went to Mexico in 47 was, of course, after the war ended, the largest Russian embassy in the world was in Mexico City, Mexico. So Applegate and, to quote him, God bless his soul, his boys were in Mexico to keep an eye on KGB agents. And they had some pretty good encounters. Hand stuff, gun to gun stuff, knife to knife stuff. And, you know, it's funny because I just said many times over the 8 years that I knew him, he would call on a Saturday afternoon and we'd have a 4-hour conversation about something. And in one case, I remember he was headed off to Germany to train Group 10, the mountain group, our special forces group that was at the time in Germany. And he said, you know, Joseph, when I finished training them, the GSG-9 has asked me to work with them a little bit on point shooting. And I said, are you going to do that, Colonel? And I'll never forget this. It's priceless to me. He said, I don't know. You know, they shot at me in the war. And I went, that's a good point, Colonel. That's a good point.
That's awesome.
I don't know if I want to teach them how to shoot. They shot at me in the war. So those are just, you know, again, just the good luck that I had. But again, to get back to our core topic here, not for me to ramble on with Applegate stories that are irrelevant, but look at the life he lived. If he got in a shooting, it was up close and personal because some KGB agent or some other enemy of our country approached him at close quarters as a spy and tried to stab him or tried to shoot him or whatever. That sounds to me like your typical street cop at a domestic or your typical street cop walking up on a car on a traffic stop. Whereas, you know, Paolo made a comment earlier, we're seeing a lot of sandbox veterans that are coming back, and now they have their own shooting school. And I'm not knocking any of our veterans. Of course, they're all heroes, and I love them to death. But I took a class a few years back from a veteran, and later I decided to do a little research on him and found out that he'd never been in combat. He was basically a file clerk in the Army. He had never seen combat. Did he go over there? Yes. Did he serve his country? Yes. Did he help keep my family safe? Yes. God bless him. But he'd never been in a shooting in his life, even over there. So now he's going to come back and open up a shooting school and say, look, I was in this military organization and now I'm going to teach you. And don't get me wrong, we have a lot of cops too that have been there and done that. You know, it's a human condition. People take their background and they try to modify it to promote themselves. And, you know, me personally, thank God, I've never shot anybody. I've been at shootings. I've been shot at twice in my life. But I've never shot anybody, and I hope I never have to. When the time comes, I just hope I don't let the colonel down. But I just hope it never comes. I'd rather not have to shoot anybody or stab anybody or kill anybody. I feel bad enough when I got to beat people up in the line of duty, and it's completely legal. So the last thing I want to do is have to shoot somebody. But again, I tell my students right up front, if I'm teaching firearms, I tell them, look, I've never shot anybody. I've been shot at. Both times I didn't know where it was coming from and didn't have a chance to return fire. But I got to tell you, I'm not that guy who's going to tell you I've been in 6 or 8 or 10 gun battles, because I haven't.
But we've all had the opportunity to see the Leoka studies and to draw some of our own conclusions on that. Alexandra and Paolo, if you were to change what we're doing on the range, if you had your own, you could fulfill whatever your heart's desire is in training our new cops, what would that training kind of look like now?
I'm going to go with real broad general, but again, doing the core concepts, the fundamentals, getting them going with their tactical, their technical skills on the range to get everybody up to a point where then we can maintain that, and we can also branch off into that decision-making training. So to combine those as quickly as we can, but I don't think you can do that unless you have that core skill set really down pat to the point where, as we mentioned earlier, that, for example, I know we keep going back to qualifications, but those just become not a thing. It becomes just simple for everybody. If we can get to a point where your whole police department's like, yeah, not a thing, we're done 10 minutes and now we're into training, I think we've accomplished something there with getting people up to a standard where now we can actually do the more advanced, intermediate advanced stuff we need to be doing to get them better at decision making and what we're going to do in those close encounters and how quickly you need to react and recognizing the factors that are in front of you when they come up so that we can make the right decisions. All those things that you can't really do if you're still focusing on how do I do a mag change, right? You have anything to add? Okay. He likes that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think that once we have whittled down the essential skills, that what we need to start doing is the need to incorporate that deliberate dynamic movement early. Once they have the skills to put rounds where we want them to go, and they don't have to be, master class shooters before we do this. They could, even a couple of hours into the range, start getting them into the mindset of unrooting their feet, deliberate dynamic movement offline. I think that kind of stuff is absolutely critical because it carries over to the simulators. It carries over to the force-on-force training. Yeah. I think that you're spot on with that. And I kind of hear this same refrain from instructors all over the United States. So how come we're not doing it?
Right. Crickets.
That's that's an excellent point. So unfortunately, we aren't the decision makers somewhere. And in Michigan, our in-service course of fire has, well, first of all, we didn't have one. I came on the job in 1977, and until about 15, maybe 18 years ago, you didn't have to do anything to maintain your license as a police officer in the state of Michigan. You literally had to do nothing. Now we have a 25-round course of fire. And I know that sounds very inadequate. I actually sat on the committee that updated our course of fire, and we started at 100 rounds. But there were so many small agencies in Michigan. I mean, the typical police department in Michigan has 6 to 8 officers. And a lot of those communities said, we can't afford to have them shoot 100 rounds a year. And in my mind, I was thinking, then why are you a police department? Let the sheriff's department or the state police handle it. But these small communities, they love their fiefdoms, and they wanted to be able to maintain their little tiny police department. And so we ended up with a 25-round course of fire because somebody somewhere said, okay, we will kowtow to them. We'll let them win. And we all know this is a very distinguished group, and I'm honored to be part of it. But we all know that we don't strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. We need to make our people better, not worse. Again, I came from an agency of 160 officers where we shot 4 times a year. When I originally worked for the sheriff's department I'm at now full-time as a deputy from 1979 to 1985, and we shot every month. There were probably 500 deputies back then. I've now gone back to that agency since I retired from my full-time job. We now have 1,400 deputies, and we still shoot every month. We only qualify once a year. Those other 11 months, we are training. We are teaching people to shoot at night with a flashlight in their hand. We're teaching them move and shoot. We're teaching them the tactics that go along with the technique of shooting. I think everybody on this panel agrees that movement is life. So they should be learning to move. I think we all probably do the same thing. We initially teach them move, then shoot, and then eventually move and shoot to the best of their ability. Because again, movement is life. And there are so many innovations just in our lifetimes. When I came on the job in '77, if you had told me that one day there'd be a flashlight on a handgun, or there would be a laser sight on a handgun, or there would be a red dot sight on a handgun, nobody would have believed that. If the colonel was still around, I know that there were laser sights around when the colonel was teaching, and he said, that's all well and good, but if you have not mastered the use of the one-hand gun, then what do you need all the accessories for? And part of the problem is we have to get back to the basics. I meet so many people that can't shoot the one-hand gun with one hand anymore. They're only accurate with both hands on the gun. And whether you're shoving your partner or an innocent person out of the way, or you've got a ticket book or a flashlight in your hand, you might be shooting that gun with one hand, and it might not be your dominant hand. So why aren't we improving the skill sets of all of our people by making them shoot at least at close distances, out to 21 feet or so, with their offhand accurately? They should be able to. One of the best classes I ever went to, other than training with Colonel Rex, was an NRA, where they told us, we don't care if you're right or left-handed, bring a holster for the other side and bring a second gun. You're going to be shooting with each hand. And every course of fire we ran, we had to run it with, I'm left-handed, but we had to run it left-handed and then right-handed and qualify. And it was cool. And I was like, why aren't we doing this more? That's genius.
If you want to run, you need to walk first.
Exactly. And I think sometimes we forget those core critical skills, which is master the use of the handgun and be able to use it as a one-hand gun. I mean, in this day and age, I would guess a majority of the agencies in the United States anyway, I don't know how it is in Italy or Canada, but we're back to 9mm now. Well, when I hear a police recruit at the academy say I'm recoil sensitive and we're shooting 9mm, I'm like, you're in the wrong profession. The fire academy is down the hall on the left. You picked the police academy. That's the wrong academy. Because if you're recoil sensitive to a 9mm, you picked the wrong profession. You know, you should be pulling holes up a stairwell in a burning building. You should not be carrying a 9mm handgun and complaining. So, just my thought.
Listen, what I should do is I should lead these conversations more often. So Todd's gonna get an offer in the mail to be a co-host for the podcast.
He did a great job.
Fantastic job. No, I appreciate you guys just continuing that conversation on. I mean, there's so many things that we can dive into right now. A few things that I know we want to get into some of the human factors portion of this. I know I just opened up on the chat here. I asked a question. Does anybody have any questions for a Q&A? And one of the questions, and I'll bring it up right now because it actually we can speak to it right now. I think it'll be relevant. And I'll put it up on screen here. It says, how do we incorporate threat pattern analysis into firearms training? So, I mean, Joe, I'm gonna send that one to you. When we talk threat pattern analysis, and we're gonna start getting into some of the technical stuff here. We're an hour and 50 minutes in, so I want to start talking some of the science behind the training. Let's talk threat pattern analysis. Let's talk human factors and start where do officers and instructors have to start when we talk about this kind of stuff?
Okay, so I guess tag I'm it.
You're it.
So, as I said earlier, not only has it been my good honor to train with the late Colonel Applegate, but long before I met Colonel Rex in 1990, I met Bruce Siddle. And Bruce Siddle spearheaded human performance and understanding human science. Initially, to those of us that knew him as a defensive tactics guy or a subject control guy, he spearheaded the scientific method of teaching physical skills to law enforcement officers, corrections officers, professions, security officers, professionals like that. And really, I was amazed. At that time, I was just getting involved in defensive tactics training. I wasn't really a firearms guy yet. And as I studied with Mr. Siddle, I came to realize that he's not just basing this on some panda bear teaching him kung fu on TV or something. He's actually looking at the science of survival, the science of winning violent conflicts. And as I became a firearms instructor and in various schools, I've trained at all the major manufacturers. I've been to FLETC down in Georgia to their 2-week instructor school, which is awesome. NRA, ILFE conferences. I've learned from some of the best. With that said, what Bruce was saying was it it's not enough to just teach people how to punch holes in a piece of paper. We have to look at the other side of the equation. We have to look at the bad guy. And when we look at the fact that a high majority of law enforcement shootings are close quarter spontaneous events, and that many officers are killed with 1 or 2 headshots and never even draw their handgun, then we have to look at the violent encounter and we have to determine how these things are happening. So what that led Bruce down a road to was understanding threat pattern recognition. And what that means is, what indicators are we getting from bad guys? We can call them red flags, we can call them danger cues, we can call them whatever we would like. You can see the Italian in me coming out. But we can use any label we want. But the fact is, the scientific method of doing this, which Colonel Applegate was just, when he and Bruce Siddle met, somebody introduced him, I'm not sure who. When that happened, Colonel Applegate was like, wow, your science validates my shooting system. This is just wonderful. And Bruce and the Colonel got along great because they had a common interest, keeping good people alive, whoever they are, whatever their title is, whether it's citizen or officer. But to do that, we have to recognize patterns of movement. Now, we can start with macro movements, which is big body movements, and in some cases, not movements. Like in a lot of the assaults on officers, the bad guy already has the gun in their hand. Sometimes it's concealed under their jacket or in their hoodie pocket. Sometimes it's in their hand, hanging next to their leg, and the officer never looks down and sees it. And I know that might sound weird, but when you look at the numbers, you can find plenty of videos on YouTube and other web locations that will show you that the gun is in their hand. So even if it's in their hand in their pocket, they've cut their draw time in half. They are moving quicker than we can get our gun out and shoot them. Action always beats reaction. So with that said, we've got to teach our officers how to move subtly out of the line of fire so that the bad guy is missing and the good guy isn't. And that's part of the science of survival. That's part of the science of teaching patterns of motion recognition. And we are now moving forward. Bruce never stops doing research. He's been doing research. Well, I did my research project in the early 90s, and that was on Hicks law and reaction time and choice reaction time. And he has funded or promoted probably 100 studies since then, if not more. He is constantly not accepting the status quo of this is how it was, there's nothing we can do about it, and looking at it from the scientific viewpoint of there are things that we can do. We've gone from looking at macro movements to micro movements. We're now doing research into facial expressions and things like the corrugator muscles and how the eyebrows look when somebody's angry, when they're surprised, when they're scared, when they're ready to kill. And we're looking at micro movements and not just of the face, but of the body, how the shoulders move. One of the things we see, especially in males, is that the chin will drop when they're getting ready to fight, including pulling a gun on you. Their chin will drop. It's that pugilistic response that we give when our brain says, okay, we're going to go. All right. So looking at patterns of movement, for years we've looked at how bad guys dress. We've looked, late last year, December 29th last year, we had a terrible shooting in a church in Texas. And his clothing was just inappropriate for being in church. It was for the wrong weather, and it wasn't really church-like garb. He also showed up, the killer there showed up with a fake wig and a fake beard on. There were multiple red flags. There were patterns that we could see that would tell us something was going to go wrong, and then it went wrong. So threat pattern recognition is nothing more than instilling, through training the pre-attentive system in the brain, we instill patterns of motion in our students' mind so that when it happens, it's not new to them. Through training the pre-attentive portion of the brain, the pre-attentive system, all right, pre-conscious, if you will, we are teaching them what to look for so their brain starts going, red flag, red flag, red flag. Oh, this could be a dangerous guy. This could be a dangerous lady. I'm going to move right now. I'm going to get out of the way. And it's going to happen just like it did with Colonel Applegate back in his day, toes to toes, nose to nose at very close range, because that's where a majority of the officers are killed in handgun encounters.
There's a lot of videos online, and I mean, for anybody who's watching this, you can Google, officer involved shooting, spontaneous attack against officer. There's so many different things. I actually pulled one up. I queued one up here. So, and this is one I actually had seen previously, and I had spoke with the guys, John Bostaine, Chris Butler, and stuff like that when we did our very first roundtable on use of force. And so I want to play this one for the four of you, and I want to see, and it kind of goes to what Joe was saying with, things are spontaneous. Things don't happen like they would 15, 20 feet away that you get in your qualifications at the range. So this one was actually a police shooting at a middle school. So let me see if I can bring the screen up real quick here. Chrome tab. And we'll share the audio, make sure that works. All right, everybody can see this?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if the audio will come through. Has anybody here seen this video?
I have.
Yeah, I have.
Yes.
You're under arrest. Let go. You are under arrest. Let go of me. You are under arrest. Let go of me. Code 3. Get out of here. Get out of here.
All right, so before I go through it in slow motion there, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that, what was that, 30 seconds of video footage. So, I mean, who wants to, I mean, for those of you who have seen this video, what happened in this incident, and can you kind of walk through it a little bit from what you've seen and how that's applicable to what we were just talking about?
Well, I'll jump off on that first. I've not talked to these officers. I don't have all the details. We can only say that based on what we can see in this video, this is what we can ascertain. And that is, it appears to me, with my experience, to be an unwanted subject in a school. And they decide that they're going to physically make him leave the school. I can tell you that in the almost 30 years I spent in a suburb of Detroit, I did this. I can't tell you how many times. I probably evicted somewhere between 20 and 40 people out of school buildings or other public buildings on duty. And when we'd ask them to leave and they wouldn't, we'd shove them outside the building, arrest them for trespassing, and take them on their way to jail. This is just one of those encounters. It just so happens this guy has a gun. They're at zero range. They're making contact with him when the gun comes out. They are already hands-on. They have not controlled his hands yet, and I'm not being negative against the officers. I don't know if they were intending to arrest him or just shove him out of the building and make him leave, but they weren't controlling his hands, and that allowed him to get to a handgun. So now at zero distance, literally toes to toes, nose to nose, they've got a shooter on their hands. They're lucky enough to be able to get that gun away from their body, but rounds are going somewhere, and let's just be grateful they didn't go into people. But they could have been, because he was firing that gun. They had no extreme close quarter skills, apparently, to take that gun away from him or to shoot him, because they end up wrestling him to the ground. Now, again, I'm not being critical there, but for the grace of God, go I, but I am being analytical. That's what the video shows us. Why they didn't put a bullet in his brain or somewhere in his torso, or even better, a bullet into his hip structure to drop him, I can't answer that.
I think watching the video, when we're talking about threat pattern recognition, when they first they're dealing with him in the just the entryway there at the school, watch his right hand. Looks like his right hand is inside of his coat pocket, and he's very hesitant to remove that right hand. when we talk about threat pattern recognition, if somebody's moving in a way or behaving in a way that is not natural, these are things to look for. And watching this video, his left hand's up, he's talking with it. The left hand is acting in a normal manner, but watch the right side of his body. He's bladed. He's keeping his right side of his body farther away from the officers. His right hand is tight to his body as if he's supporting the weight of something, as if he's concealing something. And these are threat patterns that we need to teach new officers, and we need to go back and continuously teach more veteran officers to recognize this is a dangerous situation. And if an officer says, hey, take your hand out of your pocket, take your hand out of your pocket to this guy, you really want that guy to take his hand out of his pocket when you're not controlling it? Be careful what you ask for here. That threat pattern recognition, if something doesn't look right, think of a better way of taking care of the problem. But that right hand, that right side of his body is telling you that this guy is more than what he appears to be.
I totally agree with that, and that's a great analysis. And what we find is, I totally agree with your statement. Don't tell him, show me your hands, because you're asking him to draw the gun. You're destroying your reaction time. Because when your brain sees that hand coming out of the pocket and says, oh, that's what I told him to do, you're not going to react to it, other than he's complying with my verbal command. The agency I retired from several years ago, 2 officers responded to an unwanted ex-boyfriend in front of the house. It was the middle of summer. He had on bib overalls. He had his right hand in his pocket. As they walked up, the one officer said, let me see your hand. The other officer said, no, leave it there, and grabbed his hand in the pants pocket and immediately yelled, gun. At which point the other officer, unfortunately for our bad guy, who was a boxer, cold cocked him, knocked him out, dropped him like a rock. And in fact, if he had taken his hand out of his pocket like the officer asked him to do, he would have got shot. And the other officer who made the judgment to, no, don't take your hand out of your pocket, and grabbed his hand in the clothing and felt the gun, saved the day. And so you're absolutely right. Again, when we look at the statistics, most of the time, the bad guy already has the gun in their hand. And in this case, he did. And we find these all over the web. Multiple encounters with law enforcement officers where, whether their hands under their clothing or in a pants pocket, or in this case, a jacket pocket, the gun's already in their hand. They've cut their draw stroke in half. And almost always the typical cop will say, let me see your hand. So you're spot on.
That goes, I think, to another part of our training, though, that even though we're incorporating more and more in the human factors end of things, it's the decision after we've recognized that the threat pattern is occurring that I think needs more work in how we're training people. So in this particular circumstance, yeah, they might have been, if they picked up on what was in front of them, they need to know what their next step is. And that's not programming a specific response for every situation, but knowing, hey, I need to act next, and these are my options. These are the things that I've rehearsed before in, whether through training, envisioning scenarios, however it's done, but making sure that we don't just stop at the threat recognition portion, and that we take it the next step to be, okay, this is how we take care of this thing. And what Joe was just talking about is the officer who said, hey, keep your hands in your pocket, and held the hand there, had a decision about how he was going to handle that situation. He knew what he was going to do, as opposed to the typical thing that a lot of our guys come up with, like, oh, take your hands out of your pockets.
Yep. Years ago, I was pretty new on the job, and they called us in on midnights and said, you're going to go with a bunch of task force people. They want a uniformed officer, and they're going to arrest a guy wanted for murder. Okay. So it just so happens I got out of four uniformed officers from my agency, I got put with 2 Border Patrol agents. And because this guy was also a undocumented alien, illegal immigrant, I think they're called, but whatever. So we find this guy walking through a parking lot of an apartment complex where we thought he was supposed to be. And I was super impressed. I'd never seen this before. The Border Patrol agents ordered him to stop. And, his right hand was in his pocket. And I was about to say, take your hands out of your pocket, because that's the way I was trained. And one Border Patrol agent says, stop right there. Put your left hand on top of your head, palm up. So he basically had him do this. He said, now, very slowly, from your right pocket, just show me your baby finger. Now just show me your ring finger. Now just show me your social finger. Now show me your index finger. Now take the rest of your hand out of your pocket. And of course, there was a little 25 automatic down in his pocket, but he couldn't draw it because the agent made him show one finger at a time, which I thought was just awesome. And I've never forgotten that. Short of that, when people say, well, if we're not going to tell them to show us their hands, what are we going to tell them to do? You're going to tell them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that, we got to be careful what we ask for of these folks. If they're taking their hands out of their pocket, what's going to be in their hands? I think that there are multiple scenarios that each of us can think about in our careers that we've encountered where that's been a problem. And we all know of other incidents where, that whole be careful what you wish for, take the hand out of your pocket, turned out badly. In this case, Eugene Police Department, it's in Oregon. It's at an agency that's about 2 hours directly west over the mountains from my old agency. So we got a chance to sit down and really take a look at this video. I haven't spoken to the officers that were involved in that shooting, but from a tactical standpoint, looking at what they were able to accomplish and the lives that they saved, kudos to them. Sometimes we mistake being lucky for good tactics. But I think that they understood that they had something going on that wasn't quite right. They may not have been able to put their finger on it at exactly that time, but they were ready to act, and even more than ready to act, they were willing to act when the time came to do so. So good on those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest thing too, is we can never look back at these videos and say, hey, they did it right, they did it wrong. I mean, you're not that officer. You weren't in their head. You don't know what was going on. So I think that's an important part too for any instructor who's watching this. Like, we can watch videos and do, like Joe said, an analytical overview of what happened in that incident. But to say somebody was right or wrong, I think is overstepping for sure. One thing that I want to do real quickly here, before we jump back into things, is I wanted to, anybody who's on this live stream right now, I mean, there's just a few of you. So if you want to send me an email to adam@thebreakdown.ca right now, send me an email with your name. And what I'm going to do is the first 5 of you that actually send me emails, I'm going to send you some shirts and patches. So I hope you guys, can wear that, enjoy it. I don't buy these things. I went through about 3 different iterations of the shirt, so I wanted one that was really, really comfortable. So I went ahead and did that. So I'm going to send these off to you guys as a thank you to being part of this and sticking around with us this long. I wanted to do that for you. But one of the things here, so we kind of lost Joe there for a second. He's having some technical difficulties. He was telling me. Before we get into some more things here, I want to start talking a little bit of the technical things when we talk about training. And, we talk about these close encounters when we're, as an officer, it's not the 15 to 20 feet away. It's right up close and personal a lot of the times. There's systems out there like CAR, like center access relock, and things like that, where officers are taught to fire from different positions than we would traditionally teach. Is there a validity to teaching that to officers in in-service training, or should that be happening at the academy level, or should we be teaching it at all? What do you think?
I think there is some validity to, you brought up the CAR system. I think there is some validity to it. I think that some people overutilize it. I think that where it is, it does have some validity is seated in a vehicle, shooting out the side of the car. In some building clearing situations, I think that there's some usefulness to it. I don't dismiss it completely out of hand. That being said, when I've seen guys on the range try to make precise shots at, I don't mean long distance, I mean intermediate distance, you see a lot of guys struggle with it. You see a lot of guys, at distance definitely struggle with it, and you don't really see that type of system work its way into a lot of the more, I would say, traditional, but that's not really the word I'm looking for. The kind of the more, I guess, traditional academies or law enforcement training. There is some validity to it. I don't think it's the answer. I think it's part of the equation. And where do we introduce it? I think we started introducing it just after we introduced movement. Dynamic, deliberate movement. If we're going to get them seated in a car and do some of these other responses, then or do some building search type training, then we can show them how the car system can apply based on context. But I think that's where it has to start.
I look at it, when you ask questions like that, I look at it a little bit differently maybe than Todd does, in the sense that he seems to be talking about like building techniques. And I like to keep options open for people who may not be built for a certain technique, or may not, it just might not function with their physiology that well, or there's modifications that they might need to make to be able to shoot better. So pulling information from all these different places and all the different systems could be helpful to some shooters, and other shooters are going to be like, no, it's just not for me. It doesn't work for me. So you might even introduce some of those things early on when you're teaching people how to shoot, and figuring out that, hey, this just doesn't work well for this person, but this other way of doing things does. So keeping your options open and keeping techniques, a variety of techniques available, can be helpful when we're dealing with a variety of students in my world.
Maybe I agree with all, but sometimes you need to follow our body, and there's a lot of people better than me, like Tony Blauer, and during a problematic situation, your body reaction is not stay close, but take away whatever you have in the front. So I'm not against teaching this kind of technique, but I don't need to teach, because if I'm in a closed space, of course, and I cannot extend my arms, I need to find a intermediate position or something like that. But we need to listen our body, I think, personally. So maybe again, when you have a sort of level, you can introduce some technique. Normally, I don't want to say I'm against, but I prefer traditional, like Todd said.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the car system. I do think that there is some context that it can be useful. But I do agree with Alexandra that we need to find solutions for our shooters. And I've got a perfect story to illustrate that. About 8 years ago, my wife went through chemotherapy, and she's great now. But when she was going through chemotherapy, she had a difficult time maintaining her more normal modified isosceles stance. The gun got heavy. She wasn't able to control recoil as well. She was fatigued from the chemotherapy, so her body wasn't normal. At the end of her chemotherapy, we went to Thunder Ranch, and we're training with Clint and Heidi Smith. And over those 3 days on the range, she just couldn't maintain a modified isosceles stance. So about halfway through the first day, she started shooting more Weaver. And that was a solution that allowed her to get through 3 days on the range, 2 weeks after stopping chemotherapy. And, now she's got quite a bit of experience shooting Weaver, but she's back to shooting more of her modified isosceles type stance. But when she finds herself in a position now where Weaver is kind of helpful, she's much better and got a much higher skill level than she used to be. But it was a solution for the time to get her to where she needed to be later on down the road. So, keeping an open mind to other styles is really important, because we're not trying to make clones of us. We're trying to find solutions that work for them.
I was disappointed when Luann wasn't to come on, because I know one of the biggest things, and maybe Alexandra, maybe this is perfect for you to jump in here, but I mean, she has spent a career, and her whole thing is the difference between teaching females firearms training and teaching males. And there's a huge difference. And when it comes to body size and composition and athletic ability, I mean, shooters come in all shapes and sizes. And, even with defensive tactics, this one size fits all thing doesn't work. And it doesn't work with defensive tactics training, and it doesn't work with shooting. I know for me, myself, when, the biggest thing for me learning when I was an instructor as a defensive tactics or martial arts instructor, the biggest lesson for me to learn was that, if it works, just because it works for me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for somebody else. And, I'm 6 foot, 220 pounds, 230, if I'm being honest. And, when I'm teaching somebody how to do some type of takedown or, a hip toss or something, or some type of control technique, it may work fine for me, but it's not going to work for that female officer who's 120 pounds soaking wet and 5 foot nothing. So I think those same comparisons can be drawn to firearms training. And why is there such a disparity in instructors that don't understand how to teach females how to shoot correctly?
Wow, that's a lot of different questions there, Adam.
Sorry. Yeah, go with one. What when we talk about female firearm training, what is the one thing, if you could give one piece of advice to instructors out there when they're trying to teach a female how to shoot, what would it be and why?
I'm not going to say female specific with it, and maybe my mindset's a little different about it, but for example, I started this job 22 years ago. I started shooting when I was 16. I didn't expect different treatment on the range because I was female. So some of it is what the students come in with, and we need to be realistic about everybody's coming into the range to learn how to shoot, right? So whether they're male or female, you're going to find people of varying abilities and varying physicalities and varying mentalities about it, whether they are female or male. So for example, again, I came in, I was enthusiastic. You're going to find a guy who comes in and he's like, hell no, I don't want to do this. So it really, to me, doesn't have as much to do with gender. That being said, again, you need to pay some attention to, like you were just talking about, you're a 6 foot, whatever guy, and I'm going to be smaller than you are. So how are firearms fitting people? We should be paying attention to that for everybody, right? It's not just the women in the group. You're going to have guys who are smaller, guys who are bigger. So I'm going to say generally it's an attentiveness to your students, and not just assuming that because you've been through the 40-hour firearms instructor class is just enough to make you dangerous. That means you know exactly what you're talking about. Be open to the feedback they're giving you. And I think one of the great ways to do that, I love to have our firearms instructors help teach our Citizens Police Academy, because they get exposed to a group of people who have a totally different mindset than their officers do. And now they have to deal with things like arthritic hands or eyesight problems or things that cause them to think differently about, hey, how am I going to explain this to this person? How am I going to walk them through trigger control and sight alignment and sight picture? So expanding your basis and expanding your approach to the variety of people, and acknowledging that there is a variety of people that you're going to be training. So generally, I don't like to keep it a gender specific issue. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to just like call out females in general.
Yeah.
I should know better. I do this for a living. But that's what I meant was, from a physiological standpoint, there is a discrepancy from athleticism from male to female. And that's kind of what we're talking about, right? When it comes to muscle development, muscle growth, and strength, which all play a factor into how the body will handle a recoil from a firearm. How what stances work best for certain body types. I know, and that was another thing that I was really interested in asking everybody here about was when we talk stances. I've talked to a lot of officers, and they'll say, in our academy, it's Weaver only or whatever, because that's what they expect them to shoot. Now, I mean, I come from a military background, and we were taught isosceles shooting because that's where our body armor is facing. We want the maximum amount of protection up front, and that was the way we were taught. Should there be, why are there still agencies that have, one stance that they teach over another one?
I'm wondering what happens to all those people if they have to shoot like kneeling or under a car or something. They don't know how to do it because they can only shoot Weaver.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea.
I think that we get too wrapped up in the weeds there when we talk about stances. I brought up stance, and I kind of regret it now, but I brought up stance because I think that it kind of goes to showing that we as instructors need to provide solutions for our shooters. And so I was talking specifically about my wife's experience and being kind of flexible in evaluating different shooters' needs. But when it comes to stance, man, stance is just a position that your body's in at the time you need to shoot. I really don't care about stance that much. It's when we talk about shooting platform, it's more about being aggressive with the gun, aggressive behind the gun, and how you interface with the gun at the grip. I think that it does. I don't care where your feet are. I don't care if you're left foot forward, right foot forward. I don't care if you're in a deep stance. Crystal shoots in a much deeper foot position than I do. I shoot much more squared up, and it doesn't make any difference because basically from the hips up, we're kind of the same. And at the gun, how we grip the gun with a high grip with a 360-degree coverage, as high on the gun as possible, and gripping the gun as tightly as you possibly can with the support hand. And doing those kinds of things is much more important than where your feet are. I mean, that's just kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, Joe, you just kind of joined us again. What we're talking about is, do stances really matter? And from a physiological standpoint, with different body types, are there certain things that instructors should be keeping in mind when they're instructing people, or when an instructor trainer is teaching an instructor how to teach other types of shooters?
Yeah. So we obviously we have to deal with various body types when we're training people, and we've got to make techniques fit the individual. Over the years, I've gotten a new hip and had both my shoulders worked on and what have you, and I can't do some of the things the way I used to do them. So a good instructor working with me would tell me that with your body limitations, with your body capabilities, this is the way you'll have to do this technique. So, hopefully we don't have recruits in the academy that have restrictions like that, although in this day and age, that's not impossible. But we've got to make the technique fit them. Obviously, the better fitness factor we have with our students, the better they're going to be able to perform physical skills. But yeah, we've got to, Colonel Applegate in his body point position was very big on getting the tricep over the sternum in the body point. Not everybody can do that. And it's not just because they're out of shape. You get some people that lift a lot and they've got big arms and big pecs and they've got solid stomach muscles. They might not be able to get that arm centered on the torso, on the sternum, the way Colonel Applegate liked it. So I teach those students uniformed officers to put their elbow in their holster and index their arm to their body, because that's actually body indexed aimed fire. So yeah, I would say that in some circumstances, we have to be able to adjust physiologically to the student.
Whoa, that's a weird one right there. All right. Before we kind of jump into anything else, is there anything that we've touched on so far that anybody has any more points on or wants to speak to when it comes to developing trainers or developing instructors when it comes to shooting?
The only thing I wanted to mention quickly is I know that we might have some instructors out there who are like, hey, I've got to spend my own money. What things should I choose to do if I'm going to put my money down somewhere to go for extra training? And I think Todd kind of mentioned earlier, I just wanted to underscore the point that the collective conferences where we go and meet other instructors are a great place to start out instead of the crapshoot of, maybe taking a class from somebody you found online for 40 hours and not really knowing who they are and what they're about. Bang for your buck wise, getting to a place where you can meet a whole bunch of people and be in classes with them and see how they work, and then have the opportunity to teach yourself later on, to come back and teach as an instructor, and you grow a whole lot that way. That's a really good place to start if we have folks out there who are the 40-hour people looking to do more.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. One thing before we kind of jump on to Todd, what I just asked everybody was if there was anything kind of what we've spoken to already when it comes to developing instructors and trainers, or types of things that they should be knowing. Is there anything else that you want to kind of add to that?
I just want to go back to ongoing continuing education. I think it's the single most important thing that we do. That getting that instructor certification isn't the end of the game. It's just the beginning. Start reading books, start listening to podcasts, start learning more about the learning process, start learning about the history of shooting and where we came from, and are we mired in the same spot or are we moving forward? I think those kinds of studies is absolutely critical for a firearms instructor.
If I can relate that background to my martial arts background, I started studying martial arts in 1970. And if I had walked into the school that I trained at for many, many years, for 18 years anyway, if I had walked in and the instructor told me, yeah, I just completed a 40-hour course, now I'm a martial arts master and I'm going to teach you everything I have mastered in 40 hours, I obviously would have walked out the door and not stuck around. And yet, I hate to say it, maybe Canada's the same way, maybe Italy's the same way, but in law enforcement training, you can go through a 40-hour school and all of a sudden you're gifted enough to be able to teach other people stuff. And Todd's right. It's continuous, ongoing quality training. That's what it takes.
Yeah, I really wish Brandon would have had a chance to jump on with us. So I just actually did a full 2-hour interview with him for the podcast. And one of the things that came up in conversation was that ongoing training. And I mean, to speak exactly to your point there, Joe, what I equated it to was my martial arts experience. And when you become a black belt, I mean, if you're in any type of legitimate school, any type of legitimate lineage, you get that black belt. That's the beginning of your journey. That's the start of it. It's everything up to there is fundamentals. And from the point where you become that black belt, become that instructor, that's when your learning has to start. And that's when you have to kick it into high gear. And I think that's important for firearms training. I think it's important for defensive tactics training, or any trainer, teacher, or instructor. I mean, resting on your laurels is a very quick way to be left behind in the dust. So I think that's an awesome place to leave that. So one of the things that I did want to bring up, and this was something, and I promised Chris I was going to mention this because you had mentioned Leoka earlier, and he had brought this up, so I wanted to speak to it a little bit. This is what he wrote me. So he said this was from Leoka 2018, and he said 71% of officers were shot in the head or neck. Almost 60% did not return fire. He said, let's start with the startling reality and understanding what is going wrong with officer training. Spontaneous attacks at close range evolve within 250 milliseconds. The first critical survival response for officers is to move their head offline, then their torso, then move their feet, and then draw and get busy with their gun. But almost the exact opposite is happening in range training, and therefore training scars are instilling exactly the wrong recognition prime decision-making. Until firearms trainers start training officers for the reality of the speed and proximity of the attack, cops will keep getting shot in the head. We need a fundamental paradigm shift in firearms training based on human factors science. So essentially what he's saying is we need to start training officers to move off the line first, before draw first? I mean, so does anybody want to kind of start with how they're implementing that with their training?
I would say first off, it's not moving offline first. It's recognizing the threat sooner and faster and first. It goes kind of back to that threat pattern recognition, and then we start talking about that dynamic and deliberate movement. And if we're not incorporating that threat assessment part of it, the recognizing the threat cues that officers are missing out on the street, that officers have sacrificed their lives to teach us today, then we're missing this whole thing completely. We could talk about deliberate dynamic movement. We could talk about when to get the gun out. We can talk about when the gunfight actually starts and if it's a gunfight. But if we're not recognizing those threat cues first and foremost, we're behind the game.
I totally agree with that. And if we go back to the shooting we just looked at in the school, I agree with the statement if the officer's reacting to the bad guy. But if we look at that shooting we just looked at in the school, and if we look at the shooting from Noble, Oklahoma, 1 or 2 years ago now, where the officer stops the biker, and I believe it might even be a sergeant that stops this biker. And in the Noble shooting, same as the school shooting we just watched, although the bad guy goes for his gun in the Noble shooting, the sergeant's so close that he shoves the gun away. He's close enough to touch the gun and push it away from him so he can't be shot with it. And then he shoots the bad guy and drops him. In the shooting we just all watched, the school shooting, if he had simply grabbed his wrist so he couldn't pull it out of his coat pocket and then slid down his hand and felt the gun, he would have known there was a gun in his hand. And again, we're not reacting to the bad guy. We're being proactive, not reactive. And so he's spot on. Again, if we get ahead of the danger cues and we take action first, we're making the bad guy react to us instead of us reacting to the bad guy. We're actually engineering time. We're creating time in the officer's mind because they're taking action first.
Awesome. Thanks to technology, I'm able to share this with you. So this is the one that you were speaking about there, Joe,
Yes.
right?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay, so I'll play this, and then if you want to, if you can speak to it if you'd like.
Both your hands. Let me see both your hands. Good.
No, I'm sorry. This is the wrong one.
There's a wrong one?
Yeah,
Ah.
that's not the shooting. This
What?
shooting it'll be in front of a house, and it'll be a motorcyclist who's talking to the sergeant.
Okay, let me find it. You guys keep going. I'll find this one for you.
Okay.
Alexandra or Paolo, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts go back to what I was talking about earlier, and I'm still not sure as collectively as instructors is something we need to think about. How do we get better at teaching the combination of recognizing the danger cues with what we're doing on the range? What I don't like seeing happen is the whole concept of, move off the X becoming like the whole, scan behind you thing where people aren't actually even looking for a threat. It's just something they do after they shoot. And we need to figure out a better way to instill that in our people. I think some of it goes to things like the scenario-based training where you can watch things happening on the screen in front of you, be able to point out, look, this is a danger cue, this is a danger cue, this is what I would do about it. But collectively coming up, I don't have all the answers here, just a bunch more questions about the best ways to implement that in our training so that we're not simply creating another thing we do on the range, but it doesn't have good meaning in our students' brains, if that makes sense.
Oh, that totally makes sense. I totally agree with you. We teach them to automatically do something that might not even be appropriate for the arena that they're in at the time.
That's why it has to be deliberate. We can't create what amounts to a conditioned response that every single time I draw, I'm moving left or I'm moving right, or every time I'm reloading, I'm moving. Okay, what if you're behind cover? Well, I'm not going to move out from cover when I reload. Really? If it's your conditioned response, you might.
Right.
You can also create a bad scar because in real situation, I'm never be in a gunfight, thank God. but even take your body off the X for 30 half a meters or half a yard in a good, if in front of you the bad guys can shoot 30 centimeters, don't make the difference. You know what I mean?
You only have to, the bad guy's moving his firearm a lot that much to be able to capture you as you think you're moving far enough off the X. I mean,
it's not a solution, the movement. And sometimes when you're not freeze, I suppose. I practiced Shotokan karate back in, I did for 26 years. And the first time I fight in a kumite, we don't wearing any protection. When we start wearing protection, our movement was more slow. I don't know how to explain, because we know sometimes can hurt, but it's different. And the same is in reality. I don't want to add more time to my draw because I want to move. Because naturally my body can help me in a stress situation, or I hope. With a good training, this happens.
And I think part of the good training is recognizing those threat cues and being able to pick up on those, so that your natural reactions plus that quick draw are going to work together to help you in those situations. If that makes sense, instead of
agree.
Instead of continuing to create this idea that, okay, now we're going to add another step into the way we present our guns on target, because, well, some studies showed us, I shouldn't say study, but some incident showed us that maybe this is a solution. And it's a strange thing, I think, we do, trying to apply kind of band-aids to keep our people safe, as opposed to addressing the true physiological nature of what we do and all of the other things that go into an encounter like this, which is why the human factor stuff is so important, to be looking at that research and looking at those ideas and saying, okay, what could we expect and how can we work within the things that naturally we're going to do as humans.
And I think that's where the movement, movement for movement's sake is just wasted time and wasted energy.
Yes.
It has to be deliberate. It has to have purpose, right? Jeff Hall, who is a retired Alaska State Trooper, he's also the modern founder of Hujutsu, the martial art of the gun. But he used to do a program, and it was called Finish the Fight. And what he did was he showed videos of officers that were doing something other than fighting. They were trying to communicate on the radio. They were trying to maneuver when they should have been fighting. They were trying to do something other than fight. And sometimes there's a time to move. Sometimes there's a time to communicate. Sometimes there's a time to fight. And we can't confuse those things. And as part of our training process, I think that as instructors, we have the obligation to help our students understand when it's time to communicate, when it's time to move, when it's time to fight, and what's appropriate for whatever context we're putting them in. Movement for movement's sake is a waste of time and energy. It needs to be deliberate. It has to have purpose. We do a drill out on the range where, I'll be, and I think Alexandra, I think that you've seen this, where I'll say, I'm, 3 yards away from you, and I say, go ahead and stick your finger out and put it on my chest, and follow me on the range. And I'll just run back and forth and go, is it hard to follow me with your gun finger? You're like, no. Then why are we teaching guys to take a step every single time they're drawing? Why are we teaching folks on the range that every time they reload that they got to move, right? That one step at that distance isn't doing anybody any favor, and you start to increase distance, and it's even less effective.
Even at 20 yards doesn't change. Even at 20 yards, if you're a good shooter at 20 yards,
doesn't change.
Right? So why?
It's got to be deliberate.
Yeah. Years ago, I was teaching out in Utah at that advanced law enforcement training camp, and I had I was giving a lecture on human performance and on teaching things unnecessarily. And one of the points I brought up is a lot of times when firearms instructors teach you to reload on the range, or they tell you to maintain a hot range, if you run out of rounds, if I tell you to give me 4 rounds, fire and you get through 2 rounds and your gun slide locks to the rear, for years what we taught was reload the gun and fire the next 2 rounds. And I said, that's you. The term I use when I teach is, you don't owe me any rounds. If you get to a point in a course of fire where you need to reload, don't just come up and automatically start shooting after you reload, because I don't want you automatically shooting when you shouldn't. So I'm giving this lecture, and some of the guys under the tent, because we taught at an outdoor range, they're like, I don't agree with that. I think you should make them, I think they owe you those rounds. I said, I disagree. Well, one of the guys in the front row raises his hand and says, I agree with you, little Joe, because in the middle of a shootout, he was on a bank robbery detail in New Jersey. And in the middle of the shootout, he was hiding behind his engine block. The bad guys were shooting at him. He reloaded his gun and automatically put 2 rounds into the front tire, just because his brain said, I'm reloading, I have to shoot. And that's the kind of automatic response that we don't want to be an automatic response. So I agree. Right. Sometimes not moving could save your life. The problem is in the fraction of a second, because if we're once again reacting to the bad guy in a fraction of a second, it's going to be tough to determine, should I move or shouldn't I? And that's a decision-making process that's tough. Some things do need to be automatic, but like automatically reloading when your gun is empty without thinking about it. But that's a tough one, and that calls for movement time, basically a time movement study, and organizations like PPCT have done those for years. But any department, any individual could do a time motion study and ask themselves, what makes sense here? When we look at the big numbers, what's going to give us the best answer? Because again, we've got to come up with some kind of solution. But the only way to do that is through valid research. Run 30, 40, 100 people through the same scenario and see what works the best.
I think though, as we're getting less and less connected with people right now, and this is something that, I mean, everybody bashes on the millennials for a variety of reasons that some of them are very unjustified, but they're all so connected through computers and not face to face, that I think it's going to be more helpful for our departments to really hammer this human factor stuff home, and to really be looking more at how we train our people to recognize these person-on-person cues, because they're just not even getting that interaction with other people around them. I mean, it's different. It's strange to do this stuff even on video cameras. How are you going to recognize when you have somebody in front of you who's getting ready to beat the snot out of you, and they can't pick up on the cues because they've just never seen them before, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, there's a lot to that. I mean, we're several decades into the fighting never solves anything thing, which we all know is total bullshit. Throughout history, fighting has solved everything. It may not be the ideal way to solve a lot of problems, but it solves problems, right?
And not pretty, but it works.
It does. But growing up fighting or participating in martial arts or whatever the case may be, a lot of us, that's where we got our first introduction to threat cues, right? Mm-hmm. And nowadays we're not seeing as many people that have that ability to recognize those threat cues. So utilizing technologies to show them those pre-threat indicators, those pre-attack indicators, to get them to understand these are things you need to look for, because these are things that are going to lead to something bad happening. And if you can get ahead of it, that's the way to do it. Because I mean, quite frankly, a lot of our new cops and I don't mean millennials. I'm talking. We're several decades into the fighting never solves anything bullshit. It's costing our police officers lives and injuries because they're not picking up on those threat cues. And I think it's absolutely critical information that we owe it to them to train them on.
I totally agree that we're bashing millennials. I know it's another topic. I'll keep it short, but my daughter's a millennial. She's a cop and a trainer. My nephew's a millennial. He's got a master's in psychology and therapy, and he works down south in a southern state in a institution for juvenile criminals and he puts his hands on kids every day more than the typical cop does. And they're both millennials, but they're doing the job that has to be done. So I agree. Millennial bashing's just not the right thing to do.
No.
Joe, I got your screen here. Do you want me to add that up here and you can speak to whatever you want to show here?
Yeah. Let's go with the Noble, Oklahoma shooting.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I got it up here. So you got to just pick what you want to show here.
Oh, I can do it?
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Well, I'm trying.
That's all right.
Well, I got my mouse on it, but it's not opening it.
Okay.
All right.
I'll let you work on it on your end. Once you get it up and queued up, we can jump into it. Speaking of videos and things, I know this is kind of off topic, but two things I want to talk about was a little bit of technique when we're talking about training, because I know this comes up a lot in your training. This is a video that actually Todd sent me that's on YouTube. And we're talking about trigger slap. And so Todd, maybe while Joe gets that sorted out, do you want to I'm going to put this video up and we can talk a little about I know we're kind of going really, really, really specific on something, but I think it's something important that will be beneficial to especially junior instructors and instructors that are watching this.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay.
So when we talk about a lot of especially new instructors, one of the things that they'll always tell their shooters, hey, you're slapping the trigger, front sight, focus on the front sight, you're slapping the trigger, Great. It doesn't do anybody any good because they don't really understand what the shooter doesn't understand what they're doing. The instructor is misdiagnosing them. Quite frankly, in order to develop combative speed and accuracy, it is impossible for shooters not to slap the trigger, at least to some degree. The better shooters are going to have less trigger slap, but we're all going to be doing it. And here's a video of a really good shooter, and she's slapping the crap out of the trigger. And as you play this video, you'll see that when she first starts, she's at 10 yards. She's shooting on steel, so if there's audio there, you'll be able to hear it too. But when she first starts shooting, she indexes her finger on the trigger. She takes up the slack right up to the pressure wall, and then she starts to press through. As the video goes on and is in slow motion, you can see that her finger between shots is coming completely forward, not just to trigger reset, but it's coming completely forward and occasionally losing contact with the trigger, right? She's relaxing her trigger finger. We all know that relaxed muscles move quicker and smoother than tense muscles. So she's relaxing that trigger finger. She's comes back into contact with the trigger and is just pressing right through the slack and right through the pressure wall again. And this is a really good shooter. But she is slapping the trigger. A lot of instructors would come up to her and say, hey, you're doing a good job. I don't see anything wrong, right? Until they saw this in slow motion, and then they say, hey, you're slapping the trigger. What the video doesn't show is that downrange, all of her shots are hitting at 10 yards or hitting an 8-inch piece of steel dead center every shot, right? The best shooters in the world slap the triggers. Us mere mortals, we slap the trigger. What we want to try to do is to keep that trigger slap from changing the orientation of the muzzle to the intended target area. So we don't want the slap of the trigger to necessarily mess with our ability to make good hits here. So here it is in slow motion. You can see her take the slack up, and then she presses through. Then all of a sudden, finger comes off the trigger. She presses straight through. And these are very quick shots, and she's making good hits each and every shot, right? But she is slapping the trigger.
Yeah, we'll play one more time here so everybody can see that.
So here's real speed. Okay, I got a little change between the video and the audio on that. So watch her finger come completely off the trigger between shots, and she's pressing straight through. Right. even the world's best shooters are going to slap the trigger. The key for us as instructors is to minimize the amount of trigger slap and to get the shooter to stabilize the gun as much as possible so that the gun stays on target from shot to shot to shot.
Awesome. Yeah.
Sorry.
Looks like we lost their video there for a second. Oh, they're back. Does anybody want to speak to the trigger slap in the video we just watched before we watch Joe's video here?
Just real quick, we can make technical errors, whether we're talking driving, whether we're talking shooting a gun, a handgun, a long gun, a rifle, shotgun. We can make little physical mistakes in our movement time, but if the overall quality of our technique makes up for those mistakes, then it's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what you see in this video is that her grip on the gun is exceptional. That gun is returning right back to her point of aim time and time and time again, not because of where her feet are, but because of how she's interfaced with the gun. High grip on the gun. There's no gaps in her grip, and she's got a phenomenal grip strength. So the gun comes back to the same point of aim each and every time, even though she's slapping the trigger. And she's not slapping the trigger, super bad. Like she's just not. She there is trigger slap there, but it's not horrible. But the trigger slap is hidden because of her strong shooting platform and her grip on the gun.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So Joe, we got your video here. This will be the one.
That'll be it.
You can. Do you want that full screen or do you want it just like this?
No, that should be fine.
Okay.
So this is a traffic stop on a biker. The biker's going to walk away. The sergeant's going to follow him. The biker's going to reach into his coat. Maybe he's telling the sergeant he's getting his ID. Maybe he isn't. Whatever it is, he's going to produce a gun. And in this case, the sergeant's going to be so close that he's going to knock that gun away before he returns fire. Had he automatically stepped away and not shoved that gun out of the way, he would have ended up being shot by that gun. Now, this sergeant did an awesome job. He not only kept the gun from pointing at him and dropped the bad guy, but he didn't shoot the innocent civilian that ran up behind him.
Yeah, I love this video because it shows you that initially, even though the threat here is drawing the gun, initially that's not a gunfight.
No,
that is a empty hand technique initially, and then it turns into a gunfight.
Yep.
Okay. Can you say something? Think about the movement or bring out the X. The agent, the sergeant, naturally stepped back and watched his back, and he moved. He was not freeze after a bad situation. So I don't. How I can teach that movement at the range? It's impossible.
You're right. And here's exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. This is a perfect example of why we need to combine combative skills, and why this would not be a live fire exercise in the range, but this would be a good. I wouldn't even use simunitions at this range. I'd use a blue gun, but I'm not sure I'd want to be shooting simunitions or any high-speed pain marking cartridge at contact distance just for the safety factor.
And again, the sergeant with his the left arms, he push away. He don't close. In a bad situation, your body try to push away something. And this is the best example about what I tried to explain before, I think. But maybe all of you understand what is my my point. And this is the perfect example about what I'm saying.
And I think your point was, Paolo, that we can't just teach a specific movement all the time because it's not going to work. Yeah, exactly. And you're spot on.
Right. And to use the body's natural reactions, because
Yes.
as he's saying, the natural startle response is that you're going to push out and you're going to get away.
Yep.
And
Push
how do
danger,
we?
yep. Push
How do
danger
we
away.
better? Yep.
So here's a question for you. I've seen training and I've seen video footage, and that's probably the problem is somebody recorded it and now we think that people do it. Where we talk about that initial startle response, whether it's that outside 90, talking about the spear system or any other type of defensive tactics system to mitigate that initial attack or assault. I've seen it where at a range somebody has had one of the Bob targets set up. So if you're all familiar with the Bob XL type targets by Century, and what they would do is they have the dummy completely clothed up. The officer's no more than a foot away, and on the range, their movement is from hand center. They come out and draw and actually fire directly into the dummy, which would more simulate the video that we just saw. Has anybody incorporated that? And if you haven't, why haven't you?
Yeah, we incorporate it all the time. I've got a whole bunch of targets right up there that we use for that kind of stuff. I think that the 3D type targets are perfect for those kinds of things. Being able to incorporate those empty hand techniques with live fire is absolutely possible. You do have limitations. You can't be moving 360 degrees unless if you have other people out on the range. But utilizing those types of things to incorporate strikes with the draw is absolutely possible and is critical to our firearms training programs.
It's difficult for me using that kind of target because it's difficult to find in Italy. But when I can, and with some, I don't want to call advanced training, but sort of, I prefer usually instead of step back, close the distance. I do Krav Maga for since years ago, 5 or 8, something like that. And the concept of close the distance is very important, and you can do only with something like dummy man. Our law in Italy have some difficulty also with that because I'm not law enforcement anymore. So as a civilian, you can, but like we said, mixed things like defensive tactics, shooting range, machine gun, it's the goal.
Yeah. I think that talks to a lot. I mean, a lot of what's coming up in every single one of these roundtables we do is interleaving training and learning. And that goes back to the instructor development is understanding what training is from an academic standpoint and understanding the different dynamics, training modalities, learning methodologies and stuff like that of your students. Is there anything to that point that any of you want to speak to kind of before we get to near the end here? Anybody? No, nobody wants to talk about interleave training and firearms tactics. Okay, that's all good. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, again, if we look at human performance, I think what we have to do is look at human capabilities and limitations. We have to look at what our students are capable of doing. And when I say students, we have to look at what the average officer can do. We had a discussion a few minutes ago about martial artists. And of course, martial artists many of them, true martial artists, spend a lifetime training. And they never stop training, but that's not our typical audience or officer. Again, whenever we do training, we have to look at the audience. We have to gear our training around not only a task analysis of what they do, but what their capabilities are. And we can't be asking the average human being to do stuff that only highly trained, and by highly trained I mean hours every day, special units, special operators do. We have to look at the typical cop in their typical physical condition and make sure that our training meets their capabilities. So it's looking at the bad guy's performance, what they're capable of doing, and what our officer is capable of doing. And again, that's the typical officer, the normal everyday cop.
I don't think that means that we don't set out expectations for them or challenges for them.
Not at all.
Right. I'm not implying that Joe said that. It's just making sure that our audience understands that it's about recognizing who you're dealing with and then pushing them to the next level, but making sure that, for example, if all of your experiences is SWAT, understanding that maybe there's other people out there that don't operate the same way that you do, so that you can get people to that level, encourage them and motivate them to get there.
Yep.
Awesome. Joe has one more video that he brought up here for us to watch. I know a few of you maybe have to take off right away. Do you guys have a second to watch the video and speak to it, or do you want to kind of just do your goodbyes right now?
Well, I got time.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can check it out.
All right.
It's a 50-second video. So
That's
this
too long, Joe. It's too long.
This is Napa Valley, California, and this
Oh.
is a deputy investigating a suspicious subject who also, again, happens to be an illegal immigrant who's armed. It's not a true traffic stop. You'll notice that her scout car is in front of him and off to her right. It's at night, and she's going to talk to him.
Can I look around to make sure? All right, wait right there. Don't move, okay? Roll it down. Roll down the window. Roll down the window. Shots fired, shots fired.
Now, this one's interesting in that, in this case, she can't shove that gun out of the way. She can't get to it. And in her case, movement is life. She steps at a 45-degree angle to the rear, stepping out of the line of fire, then circles the car. Very calm. She is just a champion. She's calm on the radio. She's not. I had cops that made routine traffic stops that screamed into the radio more than she is right now, and she just had somebody try to kill her. She's calm. She shots fired. She comes around. She engages the bad guy. You can hear him start the engine. You can hear him yelling, but she's not going to let this end well for him, and she doesn't. She does her job, and she does it well. When it comes to human performance and human factors engineering or ergonomics, it just so happens that her tubular flashlight is still in her hand, but if she was in total darkness, you notice that to get that two-handed grip on the gun, because that's what she's been trained to do, so that's what she wants to do, she inadvertently illuminates herself with her own flashlight. So we can look at human performance here, but we can also look at ergonomics or human factors engineering here and realize that sometimes we need to build a better mousetrap to make our officers safer.
Yeah, I think that watching this video, and I've seen this video a couple of different times, and I always come away with the impression that she's a hero. She did exactly what we wanted all of our officers to do. When she was faced with a deadly threat, she was willing, she was calm, she kept her wits about her at the time, and her performance was out of this world. Well, what can we learn from this? We kind of go back to those recognizing those pre-attack indicators. If you watch on her passenger side approach, what's he doing? What's he hiding? Is his movements normal? Are they natural? Is he looking for something and retrieving something? These types of things are all threat cues or things that we need to train our people to recognize because they're there. Her response to them after she missed them was phenomenal and was heroic. But I think that we can always look at what did she miss so that we can learn from that, because if I'm in the same situation tomorrow, maybe I want to be able to recognize those and learn from her shooting. And she did a great job. But look at the beginning of the video; she did miss some threat cues. Not bad mouthing her because she did phenomenal. But we can take away something from this video.
And missing those threat cues is part of being a human being. It's part of the
Absolutely.
human
Yep.
And I sweat only watching the video. So
I was gonna say the same thing, man. I hadn't seen that video personally myself. So every time I see one of those, I get like nervous. I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen. So
yeah, I know. I need
there was
to
a good
take.
outcome
I take a deep breath before I start because I cannot breathe. But we learn how our body works, and I don't know if it's clear for me what Little Joe says, but the lights in their ends teach how our body works. As soon as I am in a bad situation, what I have I close. And
Exactly.
this happened with his light, her light. Sorry, I don't want to talk about cord on the flashlight and ring or blah blah. But watching her behavior teach us a good lesson about how our body works.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we'll go back to my time with Colonel Applegate. He would call that a convulsive grip. He would say that under the stress of the moment, her brain didn't want it. It didn't even want to think about getting rid of that flashlight, but it wanted both hands on the gun. So she just went into a convulsive grip, holding onto that gun with the flashlight in the way, and she still hit her target and hit it well. So again, for all our human limitations, with the amount of quality training she had been given, probably at the academy level and in service level, that training saved her life.
Listen, we've gone over our 3 hours that I asked you guys to be here. So thank you all for being troopers. I really, really appreciate it. Before we kick off here, I mean, I want to give each of you a chance to speak to anything that maybe you want to pass along, kind of last words of wisdom, but also the chance to let people know where they can find you and what you got going on right now. So, Todd, why don't you start us off, man? Where is there any last things that you want to share, and where can people get a hold of you?
So train often, hit the range, train your own shooting skills, get out there so your skills are to the level where you can demonstrate what you want your students to perform on the range. Get out there to additional instructor training, get out there to additional shooter training, just continuously work on your skills. They're perishable, so time to hit the range. If you want to get in touch with me, Combative Firearms Training, phone number's up there, 541-598-8372, or you can call my cell number, which is 940-445-1110. You can email me at todd@combativefirearms.com.
Awesome. Paulo, Alexandra, any last words of wisdom from you two, or you guys individually, because I know you you both probably have something you want to share, so go ahead.
I think I've been elected to speak for both of us.
All right.
Thanks so much for watching, and we just are going to piggyback on what Todd said. It's incumbent upon us as trainers to keep developing our skills. Don't just look in the realm of firearms, though. To become a better instructor, you need to go out and experience instructors from other disciplines, and do your research. Look things up online. Find people to train with, that challenge you, and that push you out of your center of comfort so you can become better at what you do. We're working on just a holistic style of training and training other law enforcement officers, other instructors, and civilians. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us at Paolo, Paolo, at tedpolestactics.com, and we're going to list the email addresses with Adam later. Or me at Phoenix at firearmstrainingLTD.com. And thanks so much for listening today.
Awesome. Joe, what's the last little bit you want to leave with people listening to this right now?
Well, I want to remind everybody watching that we're all human beings. We all have quote unquote human factors, and that we have to take those into consideration all the time. And with that said, I'd like to remind everybody that if we went back 50, 75, 100 years in law enforcement anywhere on the planet, there was very little to no training going on at all. And yet the men and women that do this job every day, even if we gave them no training, would go out and do it because they love their fellow man. And we should love our students enough that we seek out through good research and development the best training we can give them to let them know that we love them for loving the people they protect.
Awesome. Hey, well, before we sign off here, just real quickly for everybody who's on the call, if you just want to hang around a second after we go, we shut the live stream off just so we can do a quick AAR. Everybody here who's watching this, thank you so much for joining us for another roundtable. It was my honor to bring this to you, and I'm glad that you got some actionable, useful information out of it. As always, you can join us live the last Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. Central Time. The next roundtable is going to be on active threat response. So that's going to take place in April. I believe it's April 30th. So make sure to join us. Visit thebreakdown.ca/IRT to get more information on that. And you'll be able to access this video on YouTube as a replay or on the website. And you can also get the audio-only version that we'll release on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us on the Instructors Roundtable, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.